All right, and it'll say recording at the top left of your screen.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right. Hi, everybody.
Wow.
Thank you so much for coming. This is amazing.
There's the teleprompter.
You're welcome.
I cannot believe that this is happening. This is super exciting, and I want to say while people are here, Lisa, thank you so much. I really thought that what today was going to be was I was going to post the last episode, and it was going to be post was out. I have no more posts to write, and then I would just sit alone in my little COVID world and feel good about myself. But Lisa, thank you so much for setting this up, because this has really, I think, like, and seeing all of you now, it just makes this really special in a way that I was not anticipating. So I have some remarks prepared. I was just hearing some yeah, so I have some things that I wanted to say. Some noise out of somewhere.
Did this work? Okay, it worked. Okay.
If it's okay for just this part of what I'm about to do, if folks could mute, that would be fantastic. And thank you so much. I love you, and I love hearing your voices, but not for just like the next little bit. So I thought I would talk a little bit about the show and the blog and kind of how this has all worked and what this has meant for me. And then that'll be it. And then like we can just talk, and like I'm happy to talk with everybody. So if I want to say, Dark Shadows. I don't know any other show that exists that like you can add, that's available and that you can stream and you can watch, that's 1,000 episodes long. Not all of the other like soap operas, like nobody has put those out because who would even care? The only show that I can think of that comes close is like Doctor Who, which is like 860 episodes, is kind of similar in that way. But like for those shows, and especially for Dark Shadows, like it's not like a streaming binge. Like if people started, I have heard actually from a bunch of people that like that since the COVID lockdown, I've been streaming Dark Shadows, and it's like, that's cool, but like not yet, you haven't. That must be still going on, because even if you watch like 2 episodes a day, including weekends, like every single day, like it still takes you like almost 2 years. So watching Dark Shadows is a journey that just takes up noticeable space in your life, and I think that's something that's amazing about it. And the show takes that journey with you. You watch it evolve in real time, and like I think like Stephen was saying, like you're changing too, obviously, and you're watching the show kind of turn into something that is strange and unexpected, and then changes and reinvents itself, and by the end of it, it is a really different show, and you are a different person. And that is really what I wanted to capture in the blog, was that sense of growth and change over time. So I started the blog because other people were doing stuff like it. Like there's a great Doctor Who blog that is like looking at every episode, and I was listening to podcasts of like people reading every episode of Spider-Man, and just seemed like fun. And I've done a lot of writing for zines and for fan sites and blogs, but I'd never done a really big project that had like a beginning and an end. And so I thought that would be a really interesting project, and I thought nobody's ever going to want to read it. So that's cool. I would be able to just kind of like learn how to do it. This will be like my starter kit for, I'll just write this. Nobody reads it. That's okay. And during that process, I'm going to learn how to write. And so then when it's over, I can take that and I can go and write something else. And so I wanted to start without any real planning or sense of like how it would develop. I was just going to kind of start the way that they started, like episode 210, which for me is where the show begins. And then I would just watch and write and see what happens. And so it was kind of intentionally improvisational, like just making it up as I went along with the writers and the producers as they were doing it too. Like I knew the big events that were going to happen, but I didn't have any plans. I didn't have any expectations about kind of like how I would write about it when I got there. So my process was that on the weekends, I would watch 1 week at a time. would watch like the next week and take a bunch of notes and then figure out what I was going to write about for those 5 posts. And that was the worst part. That was the hardest thing about doing this actually, was just looking at this week of episodes and just being like, Wednesday. I could talk about Trask on Monday, and I've got like a book that I can do on Thursday, and like I have nothing to say about Wednesday. And that was like always the panic moment. So the kind of I want to talk just a little bit about like the development of the blog over time. It felt to me like I kind of was developing it along with the show. When I started, if you've read those early posts, I thought I had to account for like everything that happened in the episode. Like I wasn't doing recaps. It was very strong early on that I was like, this is not a recap site. But I still kind of felt like I had to like at least mention basically everything that happened. And so a lot of those posts are just like, and then Vicky does nothing, and then it's a terrible cliffhanger, and I'll see you tomorrow. And so like at this time when the show was kind of like conventional and straightforward, like the blog kind of felt like that as well. And it took me kind of halfway through 1795, I think, to realize that I didn't just have to write about that episode, that I could like pull things in from the episodes around it, that I could have like a little theme, that I could write about like yesterday's and today's in the same post that was new for me. And then by the time we got back from 1795 is I think when the blog really kind of like came into focus for me. Where I started doing more interesting things. So that was when I did like the big travelogue of Jonathan Frid's 10 city publicity tour. Like that was sort of a major turning point for me for like understanding how the blog works. And I started doing like paperback library book posts and just like these insanely long things. And then at the end of the Dream Curse was kind of like the next big thing. Like the show was being so weird that I figured I need to do something that is weird and psychedelic, like with dream logic. And so I did like my first like super weird post for Vicky's dream, which was basically just a lot of like Lost references. And then a post for Barnabas's dream that turned out to be like a therapy session for the show, talking about that episode as if that's the show dreaming about itself. And the Vicky one probably didn't work, but I thought the Barnabas one did. And then that kind of, it felt like it freed me up to then do kind of whatever the hell I wanted. That the show was kind of giving me both the inspiration and also the permission to go and do new things. And so as the show developed and it became more complex, and the blog also became strange and complex, kind of on a similar track. So like in 1968, when they bring in like Tom and Chris and Joe, and they're all taking their shirts off, like that means I can start just talking more about cute boys. So I did that. And then like Vicky and the wristwatch, like going back to the past for the 7th time, and Eve like going back and like stealing the history book, and then like Barnabas going back to 1897. Like now the show is talking about time a lot more and creating paradoxes, and it's becoming kind of like both more science fiction and more like 60s psychedelic. So again, like just permission for me just to kind of like go in that direction. And then there's all the weird Lovecraft stuff where now it's like these bizarre rituals are part of the show, and then parallel universes. And so kind of all I had to do was sort of follow where those cues were leading me. And so one of the things that was really unexpected, that turned out to be really important for me, was when I started creating my own little bits of fiction. And just kind of like playing with that within the story. There's just like these little things that kind of like tickled my imagination, like the incident in Fort Wayne, and like this moment when Vicky is talking about they and it doesn't make sense, and like Phyllis Wick and parallel timelines, and like Schrodinger's cat. And so I just started kind of like following these threads and kind of like stitching stuff, sort of improvising, like stitching stuff together. And like I can't write fiction. Like I tried. I spent like a lot of years. I thought I would be a writer, and I spent a lot of years trying, and I'm not good at it. But at various points in the blog, I discovered that I could kind of like zero in on what some character is feeling, and I could play with that person's point of view for a little bit. So there was like a month in the Leviathan story where I did that 3 times in a row. Basically, it was a big month. There's like the post about Jeb seducing Carolyn called My Sweet Sweet Moves. And then there's the last days of the Guthrie brothers, and then Time and Temperature, which is about Bruno and zombie Sheriff Davenport, which I just loved. And it was just really exciting for me to be able to explore that as a writer in a way that I really like never had felt like I could be successful at it before. And so now while I'm talking to you, like the thing that I really want to say to all of you is thank you for never saying that sucked. Like for never saying like the blog isn't as good as it used to be. Like, why don't you go back and just talk about the episode? And the weirder and the more complex that it got, it just felt like people were really coming right along with me. And that just really validated what I was trying to do. Like I wrote a post called Sentences Taken at Random from H.P. Lovecraft Stories That I Have Not Read. I wrote a post that was half Dark Shadows dialogue and half dialogue from Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. And then later I did another one where it was half dialogue from The Bald Soprano. And I did one that was like basically the senior thesis that I never wrote on post-structuralist literary theory. And nobody ever said like, this is stupid. The blog was way better when you like do recaps. Like under that Lovecraft post, I went and looked at it again because I was like, surely someone must have complained. And it's just people talking about how interesting Lovecraft stories are. And so that whole process took me eventually to episode 1185, which is Meanwhile in 1971, which is sort of the craziest thing I've ever written in my life. It's the one where it's Carolyn still living in the abandoned timeline with the pirate zombies, and she beats a zombie with the boom mic. And that's when I was just like, screw it, you know what? I'm just gonna connect like all of these weird little threads that I didn't know what I was gonna do with. I'm gonna like have they in there and the Fort Wayne incident, which I'm obsessed with. But also like the Stonewall riots kind of, and being gay in 1971, didn't expect to really go there, but that just seemed like a thing. And then also at the end sort of saying, also I'm casting a spell on the world right now that is enlisting the Dark Shadows characters to go travel through time and defeat Donald Trump and stop the California wildfires. Like it's a weird piece of work. And I really did not know that like how that was gonna fly. And that was the one probably like I finished it and I posted it and I was nervous about like what people were gonna say. And in the comments, people said that it was profound and brilliant. And nobody said it was stupid. And so like you don't know how amazing that is for somebody who is sort of unexpectedly doing creative work. That I just start doing like really far out experimental fiction on what used to be basically a Dark Shadows recap blog. And the more that I tried to do, like people said that they liked it even more. And I don't think that happens on the internet. And you are all just really special. And I think that's what Dark Shadows fans are. Like it makes sense at the end for me to look at it and say like, oh, right, like Dark Shadows people, like we're okay with like material that is just quirky and eccentric and personal and ambitious and just seeing something develop in weird, surprising ways over time. And it might not be that good sometimes, but like you as people are like open to new experiences. And we're willing to go there and help me to also be open to those new experiences. And I didn't expect that. And that has actually changed my life. And I am really grateful to you for that. So that's kind of it. Like, and so there's a new thing. I don't know if folks have like actually read the stuff. There's 1,245 posts. I don't know if you got to the bottom of this one. But I talked a little bit about like what I'm doing next. So I have another project. Actually, the funny thing, people were asking in the comments today, like, so now that you're done, are you going to delete all these? Are you going to like shut the site down and delete all the posts? No, right, Margaret? Yes, no, that's of course not. Like, I'm just responding to folks. I'm like, it hadn't occurred to me that that's a thing that I would have to say. Like, no, I just wrote all these things. No, people have to read it now. But so that's the thing. But I now get to start on the new thing that I'm going to do, which I've been thinking about in the back of my head for like 2 or 3 years, basically. And I couldn't figure out how it was going to work. And then like a few weeks ago, I realized I figured out how it would. So I'm going to do it. And it's not Dark Shadows at all. It's not related to Dark Shadows anyway. But it is kind of like similar history of a piece of pop culture and looking at that over time and kind of like following it through time, the sort of the same structure as Dark Shadows, but then like doing a lot of little side trips and influences and weird stuff as I figured out. I decided that I'm gonna start tomorrow. Like tomorrow, I'm gonna do my first thing, not because like I'm really that eager to like jump back into doing work, but I just thought like, you know, this ritual, it's sort of as metaphorically, I'm gonna be doing some work tomorrow. But so it's gonna take me a little bit of time, but I'm expecting that I will probably start publishing new stuff in the fall, is what I'm hoping for. And so when I do that, then I'll like put stuff out on the site and on all the places to tell people that I have this new thing that's happening. And I'm super excited about it. And just again, like, I feel like I have inspiration and permission to do that because of all of you and how kind you've been and how smart you've been and ideas that you have brought. And that's basically the end of my prepared remarks. But thank you guys so much. It's really, it is so special to me that we are here right now and that I can talk to all of you. Thank you so much.
Michael
All right.
put his hand up.
Hey.
Was that
Mute is off.
Yeah, Michael, I see you there.
Danny,
Okay.
Danny, can I say that?
Absolutely.
Danny, can I say that's what made this so special? Was your mashup, was your bringing in so many other things? You educated me. You brought in things I never thought about and expanded my world through Dark Shadows. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, you are welcome.
Very
Yeah.
much.
Agreed. And
Yeah.
at a time when everything was shutting down,
Mhm.
that was a big help. You'll never know how much of a help that was to me, because all of a sudden last year, everything went crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
everything. And all of a sudden here was something that I could say, okay, even if I can't get to you and to a current reading, whatever, I can go back through and I can read from the beginning or whatever and
Yeah.
see what all, you know, what else there was, and go back and comment and read the comments that people were putting in at that point too, that, you know, this blog hadn't been read since 2015 or whatever, and people in 2020 were still commenting.
Well, I think one of the things I enjoyed most, Danny, in your post was the tremendous humor. My gosh, it was so enjoyable to read. You're often a very, very funny writer, and it makes it very enjoyable to read. I mean, I know I see other Dark Shadows sites and they're informative, but they're not as fun, and that's why I wanted kept coming back to you. You're
Bram
both
Stoker's I Love
informative
Lucy.
and fun.
I would
Yes,
add
laugh
that,
out loud, funny.
I would add, if I may, that you have a great gift for stream of consciousness, for what seems like stream of consciousness. Free association that is actually very tightly structured and logically thought through. It's a great combination, especially on the web.
Thank you, David.
And also, can I just say that
I'm
I would say
delighted
about-
to see you.
about-
And what I would have had back then in 1971, as I sat and watched the last episode, but not this. This I wouldn't have had. But
Michael, did you have something you wanted to say? I saw you had your hand up.
Well, I said it in the comments, but in the comments on the blog, but Dark Shadows is a soap opera that broke every rule and became better than every other soap opera. To me, this was a blog that broke every rule and got better than every other blog. The temptation of blogging is to get incredibly solipsistic and incredibly self-referential, and you just kept bringing in more and more and more and more. And it was
I
marvelous.
love you saying that. I got super solipsistic and self-referential.
you know, I don't think those are bad things. In balance, in perspective.
Yeah, but I also think that the writing got worse and worse and worse on the show itself. So from about, the Leviathans on, a show that we all loved very much. It's
Mhm.
sporadic at best and often really bad and dull. But you always captured what we loved so much about the show and how we flew with it for so many, from about 66 to, I guess, the end of the first trip in the 1895, was it? 1898?
7.
Up to then, when the show was just
When it was
flawless
good.
and fantastic, we loved every moment of it, and we're all there together. We're all loving it, and then the show gets terrible, but you always remind us why the show is actually so special.
Absolutely. That's the idea of like this is like a bad, a relationship where we're in love with this thing, and now it's slowly falling apart. I felt you expertly captured what that is, almost as if we were there for most of, I wasn't, but
Yeah.
so it exists as this thing of like, oh, this is getting bad, but I can always go back to a Quentin episode, which I've often done. You can kind of go back to stuff you enjoy, but here it's like, oh no, there is no like in that time, those episodes are gone. All that Dark Shadows is this. So it's sort of like, living through that was, and I think that was well done. A nice farewell to today's post, I thought.
Danny?
I've also had a weird thing of the last storyline. I've not seen it. I'm a bad fan. No biscuit.
I can't say that I would.
Might not want to.
You're
But
okay.
I actually really want to see it now. I'm
Like,
really
yes.
empowered.
Sorry.
I really want to see it because
I don't think you want the personal issues in your life that make that enjoyable, but it was or where you're like working crazy hours and
but
like
I've enjoyed the journey on the blog.
Yeah.
If you see
The
what I mean.
last
Well,
one.
but I do sort of have to disagree because whenever I watch Dark Shadows, I get so into it, and especially with binge watching, I just keep watching more and more. So even when the episodes aren't the thrilling time periods that I like, or the story isn't that great, there's something about the show, the format of it, regardless of what time period it's in. There's something about the format of it with the actors and the music that really pulls me through.
I just like seeing what they do with it every single time.
Oh yeah. I
Well,
mean,
the
in the
writing-
final, it's interesting. It's interesting in the concept. I think Danny puts that into perspective as to what they're trying to do, why they do this here. It's this weird coda. In a weird way, it's kind of like a lot of series have come back, and you've been glad to see them come back, like X-Files, Arrested Development, and then it's like, why did you come back? It's actually not quite as good as before. And this is kind of like Dark Shadows just kind of did that right away. It was like, okay, well, we've ended with 1840, and that's a perfectly poignant ending for the characters you care about. Now we're going to do this. And it was like, well, what? Why? Did I really want this? But yes. I mean,
Dark Shadows without the 1990 storyline, though. Oh,
Oh, that was a recap of the original 1790, going back to 1795 and stuff. But what I was going to say was that, this is, I've always regarded April 2nd, and I just said it on my Welcome Back to Collinwood podcast, and I want to say hi to Robert Hudson Sharp, by the way, if he's still there. Who is one of my who contributes, but the bottom line is that April 2nd has always been a date that would live in infamy for me, which is almost as bad as the attack on Pearl Harbor, where I'm borrowing from FDR on that. But what I really like about the crew here that has come to be a part of this gathering is I'm looking at the age range. I'm one of the original fans. I watched it when I was a kid, and I see younger people here. I didn't realize I thought Danny was a lot older, actually, in terms of his maturity level. So you can take a bow, Danny.
I feel like people know exactly how old I am.
You fooled the hell out of me.
How many of us were actually there on April 2nd, 50 years ago?
Me and
alive or watching?
That's a
I was
good
alive
question.
and not
I don't know
watching.
about alive.
I was alive but not watching.
I was.
No,
I was in utero.
I had stopped watching a little before that, so no, I missed it.
Danny, can I just, from the perspective of someone who was there, Dark Shadows was the center of my life in 1969, 70, 71. And when it ended, to me, it was a bitter, bitter tragedy. And one of the many things you've done in this genre-breaking blog is to show me that the day that I considered a day that will live in infamy was in fact a very lucky one if you truly love Dark Shadows, because it was spiraling down the toilet so quickly at that point that in fact what seemed to me an incomprehensible tragedy and injustice actually now with 50 years of hindsight and your commentary becomes not only utterly logical but laudable, really. I mean, unless they were going to do what it occurred to me in the comment section, every other show but soap operas can take the summer off. You know, nowadays Breaking Bad or whatever can take a year off and just, get it back together and look at what they've done and where they're going. These guys were flying by the seat of their pants without the resources, either creative or financial.
We have a question from Jen Miller.
Hey, it's not a question. I'm on the West Coast. I'm going to have to leave to go and get my son, who's also a Dark Shadows fan. We have many generations in our family. But I just wanted to say, Danny, thank you. And I have been a fan since I was a little kid. But I just wanted to say that, all of the posts were great. And I know you were talking about all the really crazy stuff that you did. But I have to say that my very favorite one was the crazy, you made so much out of Julia Hoffman in her room at Collinwood with her hand on the doorknob, freaking out, and all the prism stuff. That was the funniest one to me. Yeah. And I also turned my husband, who's from Colombia, onto the show through this. And honestly, if you had to just beamed down a Martian, you said, "But this is what the show is about." I mean, honestly, that blog post was brilliant. So that was my favorite.
Thanks so much. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much, Jen. So just think about like the end of the show. I actually think, that there is. I think, David, like you said, like there's something lucky about it in the sense of like it kind of teaches you a lesson that that sometimes more is just not what you want. There's definitely at some point I wrote about this, is like there was, if it was a different kind of show and Dan Curtis was a totally different person, there is like they could have just become a soap opera, and like you have like the you have like more relatives come in, basically. Like you could have Quentin's illegitimate children, like that would have been the way to get to more story. And ultimately like Joe and Rob and the folks at Big Finish, like as people now like writing new soap opera about Dark Shadows, like that's exactly where they went. And so Dark Shadows like could have done that, but they just didn't. It wasn't that kind of show, and so there really was a point where like it's not going to get better. There's just going to be more of it. And so 1841, I think, really like it was running out of steam anyway in 1840, but like the parallel time stuff like just really kind of helps us to decompress and say, like, at a certain point, like this is amazing, but this was a period of time.
I don't know, Danny. I'm going to disagree a little bit with you on that, because I'm a huge soap opera fan, and I know you're a One Life to Live fan. And I've watched all kinds of soap operas, and what David was saying about about how soaps can't take a break. Well, in the pandemic, they all did. I mean, I watched a Welsh soap opera that was off the air for like 6 months.
Yep.
and it came back and it was only on 2 days a week. And in Wales, everyone has to really social distance, and they were having these fights with people, and they were having these people making love and with her back against the wall, and you sort of see someone. Well, it was really hysterical. But the idea of resetting a soap opera, if there was a pandemic and you could take time off, or you just plow on through, and you have General Hospital and the Ice Princess, and that's like either wonderful or terrible, but it's something special. And then it ends, and then what do? And you kind of have this lull when everyone tries to figure it out. So, I mean, I think that, I don't want any more episodes of Dark Shadows, but I think a lot of soaps have pushed through that for 40, 60 years.
I'm going to call on Robert Hudson Sharp because he's been waiting very patiently.
And impatiently. Can you hear me?
No, I can hear you perfectly, and you're a patient man, Robert. Sorry about that.
Hello, Robert. Hello, Robert.
Hello, Danny. I just I wanted to say that I've been around this blog, I think, from the very beginning, although some of my comments obviously fell off. I was watching when the show began on ABC, and Catherine Lee Scott was the first celebrity I ever met when she came to town. And I was just so happy to get to meet her. And that was in 69, because they had just gone to 1897 in the story. But anyway, it's so weird about soap operas because we feel like we own them. They're our shows. And that's the way I felt about Dark Shadows. But the thing I just loved about the blog, I echo what everyone else has said about how your humor, the way you look at things. I could never write anything like that. I do creative work and I do write scripts, but I really admire your work with that. But like I've said before, I was kind of alone watching the show in 1970, 71 because all of my friends who had liked it tuned out. They got to where they hated all the time travel and after the Clinton story in 1897. So I was kind of alone, and I was watching this thing and hoping it was going to get better. And of course, when I saw that they were going to 1841 parallel time, I was like, that's it. The writing's on the wall. This show is a goner because there's no connection with everything else. So what's been great about the blog, and I was so glad that you came back and finished it, is that I didn't suffer, or I don't suffer in silence anymore. I have other people who can say, yeah, this really sucked. And one other thing before I go is that you go to other Dark Shadows fan sites, and no matter what the show did, the fans just think it was wonderful. And I'm like, I hold it to a higher standard. I think everything was great, and I got into quite a few arguments with people, but I just want to thank you for this forum, and it's nice getting, I wish we could have chatted more, but I'm long-winded, so thank you for letting me talk.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, I'm trying to get to everybody. You guys, there's 62 of us in this room, so I apologize. I'm trying to keep up with everything. So I've got a question for Danny from Roseanne. What plot line had the most promise but fizzled terribly?
I got it. Leviathan. Just because, there's a thing I kind of wrote about it endlessly at the end of that. I'm getting a lot of noise from somewhere.
Yeah, if everybody could mute, that would be awesome.
Might be.
All right.
Okay.
Danny, if you can unmute.
Unmute me. All right. Yeah. So Leviathan, there was such an exciting story point that they could have done at the end of the Leviathan, which is Carolyn finds out that Jeb killed her dad. Right. It's like they set up just the most exciting, as kind of sprawling and bizarre as the story was, that was probably the best actual soap opera, just fiction, story point that they did such a great job of getting them all the way to this point where that would just be the most devastating secret, and would have actually created real feeling and real like emotion. Like I get a little emotional just thinking about what that could have been in that episode, and they just bailed. And I don't know why. They just like, they were done, they were busy, they were going to House of Dark Shadows, and they were trying to get everybody to parallel time or something. So that's the plot line where it feels like, as messy as it was overall, like it was such a missed opportunity by the end.
And Nancy Barrett is such a good actress, right? I mean,
yeah, oh yeah,
and
she could have nailed it.
So
yeah.
underutilized. I mean, her and John Carlin, just amazing. And Roseanne's second question, then we've got a couple more people after this. I think we all know who your least favorite actor was, but who is your favorite and why?
I feel like you know who my favorite is too, which is David Selby, obviously. Like it's, well, and I mean, sorry, obviously, like David Selby and Grayson Hall were obviously just the things that that just made the show special. And now I'm saying that, I'm just like, okay, but okay, it's the five kaiju. It's Jonathan Frid, Grayson Hall, Lara Parker, David Selby, and Jim Storm. Me and everybody, I think, like those are the, and like, yes, Nancy Barrett is great, but those five are the ones who are just like the eccentrics that made the show what it was.
Well, Nancy Barrett wasn't a kaiju, right? She was just a,
yes, yeah.
She never got those big meaty storylines. They didn't go anywhere anyway. Okay, Greg.
Sorry, let me unmute. Well, obviously a sad day 50 years ago, but one of my favorite posts from Danny was where he made the point that, yeah, even though it's sad, even though, you know, we didn't like to see your favorite soap opera come to an end, ultimately it was necessary. Because if that didn't happen, we all wouldn't be here today. And actually Dark Shadows as a cult phenomenon might not have lived on, because
if it had like dragged.
Yeah, well, again, if I remember Robert Costello, the first line producer, had made a point to a bunch of the fans. On one hand, Dark Shadows was a failure because it's a soap opera. Soap operas aren't designed to last for 5 years. They're supposed to go on for decades. But in another band, it was more successful than any soap opera because you got two movies out of it. You got all this bubblegum cards and all the plastic models. But also, even if it had gone on for another 5 years, 10 years, World Vision is not going to syndicate it, old Dark Shadows, because new Dark Shadows is on the air. And if you get into like a 20-year chunk of stuff, who knows if they keep all the episodes? Who knows if they ever that's like a lot of stuff to syndicate. So maybe that never actually happens. Maybe that never actually catches on. So, I mean, the fact that they started doing
it was actually utterly bizarre that they did it at all. Like really no one else has done it.
They started trying the show was only off the air for 4 years. When they started like on 75 doing it in a few markets. But the fact that NBC actually took a shot at it in 82. And
then for MPI to start putting out videotapes and putting out DVDs, and they did it very carefully at first, of just like, they put out kind of like, I think if I remember correctly, because I think it was there, I think like the first videos they put out like weren't even like
they were
Barnabas episodes. They were like edited together just to make sure that people were going to be okay with this. And amazingly, like there were enough Dark Shadows fans to actually be like, yes, like they made all the videos, they made all the DVDs, they you know, and now it's kind of streaming everywhere. It is really remarkable that, and like you said, like, and I think if it was 20 years long, no matter how many Dark Shadows fans there were, it would just be impossible.
All right. Thanks, Greg. We've got Lidster here. We all love the Lidster because we know about Big Finish because of Danny. That's how I got involved with Big Finish audiobooks and took that rabbit hole for the summer. Lidster, you're up. What do you got?
Hello. Well, I'm going to do a few things because it's nearly 2 a.m. here and I've had a couple of glasses of wine. So I've written some notes. Right, number one, it's just really, really brilliant seeing new faces. I kind of want to be in the pub with all of you. I keep looking at people and going, look at their living rooms, because that's the one thing I've missed so much in the pandemic is just meeting new people. So hello, all of you. Thank you for being on my screen right now. Is that a real fire, Roderick? Is that a real fire? Is it? It's amazing. I just wanted to say a couple of things. I want to say one thing about Big Finish before I promote that. Nancy might not be a kaiju, but listen to the flip side. There's a Big Finish CD called The Flip Side where she's Carolyn, and it does deal with all the emotional trauma and everything. And Nancy Barrett is astonishing. She is an absolutely amazing actress. If you're not interested in Big Finish, that's fine. But just listen to The Flip Side if you like Nancy Barrett. She's astonishing in it. I just wanted to say I love what I've always loved in the blog is the humor, because I love a person, and I'm a bit of a fan of Doctor Who, but also, over the last few years, I've become such a huge fan of Dark Shadows. It's that weird thing with something like Dark Shadows where I absolutely take everything about Dark Shadows so seriously. I believe in every character. I care about every character, but I will sit there and laugh at how ridiculously awful some of it is. And that's what I've loved about the blog, is that you can have that. You can absolutely believe in every second of it and desperately worry about what happened to the 1840 people when the 1897 people, why does Edith die? But then you can really worry about that, but you can also absolutely adore the fact that Sheriff Davenport's gravestone says Sheriff Davenport. It's my favorite thing in all of television. And absolutely with the soaps, that I do think it's interesting. Dark Shadows did stop doing the soap opera stuff. And certainly when I took over producing of the audio series, one of the first things I tried to do was introduce new family members, because it was the interesting thing that I think the series did stop doing. Carolyn didn't confront Jeb about her father's death, but also she had kids. David never got a girlfriend, because it stopped focusing on being any kind of developing soap opera, which I do think contributes towards it ending, because there's only so many places you can go. There's only so many parallel universes or past times. But I just wanted to say the big thing from Danny's blog that I personally have got. Danny made a brilliant thing, as repeated it a couple of times, about the 3 rules of a new character, about making a plot point, being friends with somebody in it, and making a joke in their first scene. That is something that I, as the producer of the Dark Shadows range, tell every writer they have to do. So any new character from Bloodlust onwards, any new character, if you listen to their first scene, they obey all those 3 rules. And it's not just in Dark Shadows. I write kids TV over here in Britain. Any new character I introduce into anything obeys those 3 rules. And I'd never thought about it before, and it's literally because of Danny's blog. So I just wanted to say, thank you, Danny's blog. You've made me a better writer and me a better producer, because those 2 rules are the best writing advice I think I've ever been given and ever passed on.
Oh,
I would also agree with that.
Going on that, your anecdote about maritime. Sorry.
No, my first Dark Shadows audio, which you were distinctly lukewarm on.
I was so upset with
quite a lot. They really did, and so they're going to be an ongoing point in anything I write from now on, because it's just sort of like, it's so obvious, but it takes somebody to point them out.
I am so delighted by that, and definitely for both Joe and Rob. And I don't know if folks know that Rob is also one of the Dark Shadows Big Finish writers, and has been on Bloodlust and Bloodline. And I wrote about this, I guess, when I wrote about those shows, but but I noticed it. I can't
you reviewed a little bit of
Bloodlust.
You reviewed a little bit of Bloodline. And you reviewed Jackie Tate.
Yes.
Meeting the new Julia.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was like, Jackie literally says, "Are we friends now?" And it's a direct reference to your blog. It's a direct reference to, we need the new Dark Shadows listeners who don't know the TV series, who love Jackie, to go,
they need to love Julia.
Jackie likes this Julia character, we like this Julia character, and hopefully the same for the older fans who know who Julia is. So yes, thank you very much.
and yeah, and that was so delightful to see, and I love the show so much. And I have not asked you. 13 is the next one.
Oh.
When?
Well, no, Wincliffe is the next one.
Oh, Wincliffe. Yeah.
I've not coped well with lockdown. My brain just went gunk. So it's my fault I'm behind. Also, it's very unlikely we'll record anything during lockdown.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Actually, I
didn't.
I didn't mean to shame you as much as just like express enthusiasm about like I am waiting for that time.
They're both Wincliffe and 13 are in scripts. Scripts are written for all of it. But sadly, with recent events, both Chris, who I adored, and Robert, who I didn't know at all, we'd written things for both of them. So there's going to be some rewriting to go on. I'm gutted, so sad about Chris. He was a joy on Big Finish. I never met him, but he was just, again, oh, it's all, no, yeah. He was just a great guy, and yeah.
And to go back
Facebook.
And to go back to Wincliffe and not have Chris Pennick as a madman.
It was,
that'll be
I mean, that short story he's in is brilliant. But it's I don't want to overtake it with Big Finish, but if you haven't tried Big Finish, try Big Finish. We've done some good stuff.
Oh, it's wonderful. I
love it so much.
Danny kind of knighted you as the heir as the parent to the Collinwood storylines, and I would agree that unlike any of the remakes or the attempts at remakes or the deplorable Tim Burton film, you guys are the heir apparent. I mean, you capture the spirit of the show, and I think that's very difficult to do because the show is so much of its time, and I think Danny wrote a lot about that. How it had to be the 1960s, the late 60s. It had to be this group of eccentric weirdos in this show, and that when you strip those things out and you put a guy that was in Chariots of Fire in it, or you put a boring model in it, those things get stripped away when you don't have a Grayson Hall with the rubber face and all those types of things. We've got Rob Bowman. Danny, what was your favorite storyline?
1897. And specifically like when it was like the Wolfman and Nicholas Nickleby and Jane Eyre and weird Egyptian Phoenix thing that didn't come from anywhere, and like when it was like 27 things and they couldn't even remember like what they were doing because they had something else to do. Was that and actually, and I'll say one more thing. My favorite moment on Dark Shadows, like my single favorite like episode and moment, is Count Petoffy getting to 1969. It only lasts for like a minute, but that was like 1897 was when I really like officially completely fell absolutely in love with Dark Shadows and was following it and was crazy about it. It was like writing in my notebook, and I like basically starting my blog like in 1986. And the way that they put together like the Count Petoffy and Quentin body switch, such a silly thing, they did it so perfectly. And kind of like inching closer and closer, and then you see Count Petoffy there in 1969 in the Collinwood drawing room, and like it was the moment for me, I think, of like I had no idea what was going to happen. It could go anywhere at that point. And that like the 23 and a half hours between the end of that episode and the beginning of the next episode was the only thing I could think about. And that's like the one of the million gorgeous like things and episodes. That was the one that like I was there as that like 14-year-old, just so much in love with with not knowing what was going to happen next.
All right, that was a great answer, actually. Stephen Robinson asks, Danny, do you think Dark Shadows was a soap opera? After a point, I think it stopped being one in anything but a technical sense.
Yes, it was always a soap opera. Because of the constant moving forward. Nothing else really does that. But soap opera of like, this is just a thing that never stops, and you have to, and whatever the weird thing is that's happening, we got to come back tomorrow. That pressure, that format is super important. And now everything is a soap opera. like soap operas lost, and Richard, who's on the call, can talk about that. Richard Sims. Like soap operas have lost in terms of like daytime soap operas are obviously not as powerful as they were, and most of them are going off the air. But the concept of soap opera and continuing story is now like every single show.
TV is much more now. TV is much more serialized now. I feel like if you're significantly younger than I am, if I grew up at a time where TV was less serialized dramas. Now, if you're under 30, if you ever to give you Dark Shadows, you would sort of talk about it in a way that people talk about Buffy or The Flash or whatever, where here's the Count Bataffi season, and here's this, there's like a season line arc, and they get to that arc and they kill off everybody, and then there's a cliffhanger and they start the new thing, which Dark Shadows seems to fit more than like, if I were to show you Bold and the Beautiful in this and how the families and all of those structures, someone would look at that and it's like, well, that's not this. I mean, yes, you're right. It's like constantly moving forward, but it's so focused on one person, essentially about Barnabas Collins, or like if you were to put it in the X-Files sense about Barnabas and Julia, and that was like, it's about these people and everything is irrelevant. So you talk about Carolyn confronting Jeb. It's not relevant because it doesn't concern Barnabas. Like, and whereas we would write that, well, it's a soap opera, it's a great opportunity. Everything is like, how do we get to Barnabas and his backstory? And it's just fascinating now because it's this is what every show is doing now. They don't even do the world building of like Star Trek, where you can kind of say, oh, here's this whole big world that we're doing now. It's just this is this guy, this crazy guy that we're following, you know.
Excuse me, I need to go. I have other commitments, but I want to again thank you, Danny. It was a pleasure to meet you virtually. Pleasure to see all of you virtually. You all take care. Good luck.
Thank you very much. So good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Wayne.
Can I just add in here, one of the big problems with 1840, though, is that for reasons that Danny went into, Jonathan Frid and Grayson Hall kind of dropped out of the story. Suddenly we were instead of, they did go with the other characters, but the other characters, basically we were there to see Barnabas and Julia save Collinwood, and stop the Collinwood from 1990. And all of a sudden they were in 1840, but where were they for huge stretches? Was Julia out shopping? Did she, I knew she had a facelift, but did she take a train to New York to see President Garfield speak or whatever? It's like we lost that central thread that would have kept us coming back. And that was a huge deal for my 10-year-old self back then. That was a huge deal. Where are they? But
it's just not sustainable. They have to like live, otherwise you go insane. The Frid speak is amazing because he's doing Shakespearean monologues, 5 episodes. That's that's just not how soap operas are structured. It's like you do 2 or 3 a week, and you don't have to learn all these lines and everything. So
Frid speak is the hardest thing on Big Finish. It's the hardest thing.
I would imagine.
Where do you draw the line? Where do you, and I think with Bloodline, the latest serial we did, we really, because we had Julia back, it really was that thing of going, I love Julia and Barnabas so much. I love them so much. But in a 2019 or whatever setting, does that dialogue read?
At the
end I just went, I love Barnabas and Julia. That's how they talk.
Exactly. Well, a Barnabas who makes sense isn't Barnabas. Even the House of Dark Shadows, where he has had time to learn his lines, I feel like that's a totally different character. Like, it's just a sense of he's someone who stares out, and my wife will make fun of me. That will make these profound statements. They're like, what the hell are you talking about? It doesn't make sense, but he believes it makes sense. And it's just, that's who he is.
Would you agree he's more menacing when he's had time to learn his lines? I would agree that he's more menacing. He's more human when he's stumbling around and doesn't really know what he's talking about.
When he learns
and the stumbling around characters who we love. That's the guy we love.
What the hell am I supposed to say here? What am I doing here? Who am I?
When he's basically saying rubbish, randomly coming up with his plan A, which is usually kill someone. He's actually more terrifying.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because
Yeah,
that's
when
his
he's more
go-to
deliberate,
default
right?
setting is murder someone.
Serena, and on that note, Serena Hendricks, hi Serena, is asking Danny, what moment scared or disturbed you the most on Dark Shadows?
Disturbed me. So funny, like for a show that's supposedly scary, I'm like, I can't think of a scary moment. Because I never really thought it was scary. Like nothing scared me, except like I think the thing that scared me was that like Quentin would not be on, like it's the thing. It seems that like it's not a scary show. Like the thing that would scare me is like wasting a character or a good actor or something like that. Like that would be the thing that would be scary for me.
Not the etching. Not the etching. Going back to 1897, walking through that door, that was pretty scary.
It was exciting. It was, yeah, no, it's so funny. I have like no answer to this question. I'm sorry, I'm failing at this.
All right, Michael has another question for you, and this is going to be, if you have sensitive ears, cover them, please. Question for Danny: Dark Shadows characters of Fuck, Marry, Kill.
Of like all of them.
Got to narrow it down, Danny. You're under pressure.
It's mostly comes down to David Selby and Jim Storm. I'm gonna have to admit those are the hard. Kill Eric Lang, obviously. Yeah, but yeah, I can't choose between our guys. Yeah, I don't know.
All right, and will you confirm that Addison Powell was the worst actor to work on the show?
He was the worst actor ever on the show. Yes.
Okay.
He had competition. I'm not going to say that.
He's a crazy mad scientist. Come on.
He was aggressively bad. Felt to me like intentionally bad. Just like indicate I don't even know how to act, and I know that guy didn't know how to act.
But I got to bring up something there, and I think we were all discussing this in the podcast because we're doing that block now, and we think that, of course, this was the whole Frankenstein ripoff, and so he was the Colin Clive equivalent. And if you remember, Colin Clive in the movie was saying, "It's alive, it's alive," and now I know what it is to be God. Well, anyway, the point is that my theory is that they told him, he was probably told to overact that up.
Mm-hmm.
And especially Dan Curtis, who grew up on horror movies, and he grew up on the 40s, on the Frankenstein cycle and the 40s Universal cycle. So I think that Powell was told to act that up, and he just went with it. But he was, unfortunately, as a result, that comes through where that's not going to come through, especially in the movie. That's going to come through on a daily soap opera, and especially when he doesn't have a lot of time in the role. So he probably figures they're going to kill him off anyway. So he might as well, make a name for himself. And so that's my take on it. He may have been told to do that, and he did it too well. That's my 2 cents.
He was just awful.
I can see that point of view for sure. But then he came back in 1840 as a judge for just like a couple of episodes, and he was still just as aggressively terrible.
I gotta look at that one. I remember. Yeah.
I have to understand that Colin Clive came from some earlier movies for James Whale and like All Quiet on the Western Front, I think, and was seriously high-strung and really embodied that post-World War I sort of psychological and moral devastation. And he brought that into Frankenstein in a way that Whale might have actually intended, that kind of live wire. And he was really high-strung, a really high-strung guy. And we've lived with that idea of Dr. Frankenstein, which is not Mary Shelley's Dr. Frankenstein.
Right.
And you're looking at, with Addison Powell, you're looking at just a kind of a dullard, a block, who, if he's been told to act like Colin Clive, there's no place those two people meet.
think you have to see him in other areas of his work. I recall he did one of the early LA Laws. Was it LA Law or was it oh God, one of those early law shows from the 80s. He was in one of the first episodes. And he was totally different. So I think you have to take a look at, but I think, well, we're never going to know, because unless there's an actor or a writer who's still alive, and unfortunately I think none of them are with us anymore. But there are two schools of thought. I do think he overacted. I do think that he was less than optimal, but there are people that just like the fact because he reminded them of the Colin Clive portrayal. So,
Danny,
here's another question.
Danny, can I just ask you, Danny, would you agree that the tape recording, which had to be retaped, was probably one of the 10 most embarrassing moments in all of Dark Shadows?
Definitely just the fact that they kept playing it for us, sometimes more than once.
Yeah, we couldn't forget it.
Same episode, like if they both live, that, oh my God. Actually, like there's a lovely thing about that as the MacGuffin, that like it's written in such a way that if you hear it and you don't know that Barnabas is a vampire and who Adam is, then you don't know. Like, so I thought that was clever, that so the characters can hear it and not understand what it means and not like get the reveal from it. But then like there's one episode where Nicholas like literally tells Angelique, like, keep listening to this over and over and over. I don't know why. That might have been the moment I flipped on Nicholas Blair, just like I hate him. He did not have our best interests at heart. That's all I'm saying.
Well, let's face it, DS immortalized Ein kleine Nacht music, which was probably one of my first classical pieces, and that just kept going through my brain as a kid, and that was probably one of the first exposures to classical music that I ever had, and it's been a lifelong thing. So I can credit Dark Shadows for that. So it was not a total.
Well, there you go. We've got a question from Greg. Question for Danny, or anyone really. Do you have any idea what the original idea was for the second Dark Shadows movie before Jonathan Frid said he wouldn't do it? Since many of the regulars have been killed off in House of Dark Shadows, what would they follow that with? And since the next plot line on the soap was the 1795 flashback, would it have been a journey into the past? Which is a very complex question, but a good one.
Good question.
And question that I don't know. I can't imagine that that they thought that there was going to be like a redo with Barnabas. It just like because that first movie, the ending of it is like so definite. I think they kill everyone except for Elizabeth. There's really just absolutely nothing that they could have done except like do something different. 1795, I think, like, actually, you know, what's funny is I think that it is likely that they did not have an idea. There wasn't like a second movie in their heads that they didn't make. Like, this was, I think what we saw as Night of Dark Shadows was like, what are we gonna do? That was the first thing they landed on. They went with it. Is kind of how I feel about that movie.
Okay.
But basically, when does Jonathan Frid say, no, I'm not going to be in the second movie?
I think he said it at the end of the first movie, Greg, and he just said, I'm not doing this anymore. He was pretty mad about that movie, and he trashed it when he went out to on his promotion tours. He was very negative about the movie, said it was not what he wanted to do, that it was too horrific, too violent. And he was really outspoken about it. And Danny, I think you talked about that in one of your blog posts.
In ways that are now like the way that movies are promoted now. It's insane that they sent him out just to talk off the top of his head about how like he's kind of embarrassed by it.
He just said it wasn't what he wanted to do. Kathy Dean has a question for the group. How many of us, and you can use your You can use your little reactions button at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand. How many of us are writers, bloggers, podcasters, etc., or working in the creative arts? I think that speaks to the quality of Danny's work. So if you work in the creative arts and you want to put a thumbs up, that'd be awesome. And Danny can just see a visual of how many people have their hand up. That's a lot.
That is cool.
Danny, you should put your hand up as well.
Oh yeah. Thought it was a given. There you go.
That's a great question, Kathy. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot of people that write for TV and for podcasting. That's awesome. All right. From Brian, Danny, what One Life to Live actors would you have loved to have seen on Dark Shadows?
I actually I didn't watch One Life to Live. I do like One Life to Live is my my second favorite soap. It's actually the only other soap really that I love. But I wasn't watching it. I don't know anything about it from the Dark Shadows time period. I watched it in the 90s and I watched it in the 2000s, and really mostly I love the 2000s. And the thing that I love about it is that they were I think One Life to Live was the soap opera, the American soap opera, at least that was not afraid to just do comedy. That it was okay to have funny storylines, it was okay to have funny characters. And in the 2000s, we went for that. So there's a bunch of actors who were on who I thought were very funny in One Life to Live, who would have been perfectly welcome, and strange and eccentric kind of diva characters who would have been very welcome on Dark Shadows.
Right. Robert Hudson Sharp wanted to point out to everybody that Dr. Lang actually stopped the tape recorder when he was supposedly recording the message. So apparently he touches the stop button, and that's all we need to say about Dr. Lang.
Oh yes, yeah.
That's pretty funny. Anybody
That's
got?
interesting, considering that the sometimes when the recording starts, you don't even see the tape through the spool, and that's one of the bloopers that you pick up. So there's a lot of good stuff about that recording.
One really interesting thing that I'd like to say about the whole question of the continuing storyline, soap operas versus primetime. The other show I'm a nerd about is Star Trek: The Next Generation. And when you read about it, there was this amazing, incredible, angry, furious tension between the showrunner and writers like Ron Moore, who went off to do Battlestar Galactica, the remake, over continuing storylines. The argument from Paramount and from the producers was that, no, we don't know that people are going to be watching every week. We cannot continue a storyline. We don't want to do two-parters. We don't want to do three-parters. We'll do them if you insist, as season-ending cliffhangers. But as a rule, everything was discouraged. Now, we're talking about that was in 89, 90, 91, the exact same time the Dark Shadows remake came out. And it was conceived as a primetime soap opera, meaning you had to have seen the first episode in order to understand what was going on in the second, third, fourth. And that was that collision point between shows that were entirely self-contained and a continuing saga. And one of the theories about why the Dark Shadows remake lost audience is that people were confused who had missed the first two episodes. Nowadays, as we've said, because we have streaming, because we can go back, Breaking Bad, Vince Gilligan said, told me in an interview that Breaking Bad would not have been a phenomenon without Netflix, without all of those shows that people had missed going on and being instantly accessible to people. So there's been such a huge sea change in what's happened in primetime then versus now.
But wasn't Dallas and Dynasty on when that came? I mean, it wasn't like any other prime time. I mean,
you are correct. They were the exceptions. and they had fanatical followings, but it took them a while to get
This
those
felt like
followings.
Dark Shadows was right in this weird moment of where it wasn't like any other primetime soap opera on the air that did well. And then it also it wasn't new. I mean, it was the again, Barnabas and the weird cat burglar turtleneck, but it wasn't like Melrose Place. Melrose Place was a couple of years away, where Melrose Place was truly leaning into being weird and campy. And there was a period of where no, Dark Shadows is not crazy. It is very serious and solemn. And that was, to me, it was kind of boring. It was like, then it was like, oh, well, Kimberly pulls the wig and it's something weird. And it's, everyone going, wow, which is sad. That I felt like Dark Shadows had the potential to do that because it was a crazy show. Like the classic show was crazy. It would have those weird, oh my God, like this is a cliffhanger. Going back to the 1897 stuff, or
Serena's just being on 5 days a week makes so much of a difference to a show. You've got that constant, it never ends. It's 52 weeks a year, and whether you like it or hate it, there's always tomorrow. You can see something different.
Yeah, but they had Friday cliffhangers every day. I think Danny talked about that on the blog, where there was like, oh, here's to a point where I could go, oh, Barnabas turns to an old man that airs Friday. That's the structure. Right. To like now, I couldn't tell you what day of the week, Count Batoffi goes into 1969 or any of these, because that was every day. That show was beyond. It was like beyond what even the standard structure of soap operas were at the time. It was nuts.
Danny, Serena has a question. What is your single most favorite moment of all time on Dark Shadows? What's the one moment?
I will do that, but I actually I also want to just respond on the thread that folks were just talking about with Stephen and David about like kind of there was about sort of the rewatchability as being really important for shows to get smarter and more interesting. There's actually like a real, you can watch the difference in the amount of complexity that a primetime show could have based on once VCRs came out, and then cable and DVRs, and now it has become like with streaming just beyond crazy. That the more technology that there is that helps people to catch up and rewatch, like then a show could become crazier and more interesting. And now with stuff that is, I think it's super interesting now that stuff is released on streaming all at once, where the expectation, like it would be almost impossible to walk into like WandaVision in episode 3. How would you manage to do that in your life? Like the whole interface is telling you not to do that. That means that WandaVision can be crazy and difficult in a way that Melrose Place could. Melrose Place could be weird and kind of wild, but like not narratively complex and confusing. Like I think Twin Peaks, I saw like somebody mentioning Twin Peaks as it went by, which I think was like was so exceptional for network TV.
What was it?
91-ish.
Yeah. It aired around the same time. So I was thinking of like as a kid being into both of them. It's like and loving Dark Shadows and seeing, well, why are you getting smoked by Twin Peaks?
Yeah.
You should be going above Twin Peaks. And why are you giving me what I've already, because my mother was one of the ones who came and watched the show in the 60s, and she got me into this. Yeah. And I was like, well, we've already seen this. You're just sort of updating it, and it's not cool like Twin Peaks. So I was kind of like, what's going on? So
but Joe Haskell was hot in it though. So, there's always that.
Yes. Danny and I disagree about Joe Haskell from the night, because I'm a huge fan of The Pretender, and I was the geek watching The Pretender Saturday nights when I should have been out doing stuff. And Danny is not, obviously Danny's opinion on male hotness probably matters more.
Of course it does. But no, on 1991, it's all about Jeremiah. That is like if 1991 like fuck, marry and kill would be Jeremiah.
Jeremiah, that sums up everything wrong with Dark Shadows 1991. Was just like, here's our hot guy, and we're saving him towards later, and he's gonna be Quentin. He's gonna be the cool guy, and that later, next season we'll never have
after the show's over.
What are you doing? That's not how television works.
Michael T. Weiss is a mess. That's all I'm gonna say. So what's the other question?
So Laramie's question was
favorite.
your favorite all time, and then we've got a few more here too.
Favorite all time moment. The first thing that pops into my head is Wanda Paisley's I Ching vision, where there's it's all black and there's a big waggly skeleton that goes at her. I just, if I had to put a gun to my head, I have to pick one. Oh, how do you beat that waggly skeleton?
So great. Laramie has a question. How has doing this blog changed you as a fan of the show?
Completely. I definitely understand the show different. I did not actually come to all the same conclusions as I've been kind of watching it over time, as I what I thought about all the storylines. I think 1840 especially was kind of a surprise to me, kind of what I liked and what I didn't like, and how much I fell in love with Gerard, and kind of I guess so here's how it changed me, not just as a fan of the show, but also just as just somebody who's watching and interested in television. Doing this every day and kind of tracking, because this is really what the blog was for me ultimately, was tracking how they I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback from somebody. You folks can mute. So what was interesting to me kind of tracking the whole time was seeing what kind of moves did they make when they saw that something was working or not working. And how did they decide, you get to Julia and you say, yes, we're keeping Grayson Hall, we're gonna focus on her as opposed to these other people. That learning how to watch for that has really kind of changed me in the way that I'm just looking at narrative at all. And so by the time I got to 1840, realizing that Gerard becomes the focus because Gerard is just the most interesting person in the room. And so yes, he took over from Barnabas, he took over from Julia, and Barnabas and Julia should have been in it way more. But I could totally understand the reason why it starts to focus on the new eccentric fascinating person.
Okay, Alexandra P, you have your hand up. We'll go to Alexandra.
Hello, thank you so much. I wondered, Danny, I think it's really, really, really well-written blog. I'm one of the writers here and writing teachers, like a lot of people, and I think it has rhythm and humor and inventiveness. It's really, really a skillful job of writing. And I'm wondering if now that you're done, are you as happy with it as many of us as readers were?
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I read I'm gonna embarrass myself right now. I read my own blog a lot. I'll kind of idle moments. I will pick up my phone and the app and just read old episodes. Yeah, I'm a big fan of my own stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
As well, you should be. Pat Daly wants to know, Danny, do you know what happened to some of the props that you loved, like the Ralston Purina lamp? Well, it's actually behind me right now. The clock and other props. Do you know what became of those from the original show?
There might be somebody here who knows better than me, because I know that I think somebody mentioned in the comments at one point that I think some of it ended up on Ryan's Hope. I don't know. I never followed kind of any of the other soaps where it might have showed up.
Is it Prisoner Night?
Well, Prisoner Night, definitely he knows all of the props everywhere. Yeah, but I think I think Ryan's Hope was an ABC soap that I don't think it started right away, but it was not that long after, and they got some of the Dark Shadows actors, and I think they also got some of the Dark Shadows props.
Wasn't Mitch Ryan on that for a bit?
In 74.
74, 75.
Yeah, and it was a visually dense soap, the way that Dark Shadows was. The sets were full of stuff, because it was supposed to be an old bar and an old Irish family, and there was all kinds of stuff everywhere. So I can certainly believe in it, but it all ended up there.
There's a comment here from Michael E. It says, I love all the research you did, Danny, the backstage information about when writers were switched out, about what order things were shot in, just amazing. Which I would absolutely agree with. I just love all that kind of stuff.
I have a question on that front, specific question. I just want to say first, as someone who knows pardon my pretentiousness. I've read a lot of critics in my life, and I have never, this is what is unique about this blog. The combination of reverence and ridicule is unprecedented. We are talking about someone who can mock, satirize, parody everything that is going on in Dark Shadows, and at the same time adore it. And I think there's an aspect of camp culture that informs Danny's writing, but also, Hazlitt, Bernard Shaw, the great, I mean, it's a combination. It's truly the first time I have ever seen a kind of camp sensibility wedded to what I consider really serious and absolutely brilliant criticism. And I say that as someone who's tried to do it for 40 years and not come up to that standard. My question, though, is, Danny, how much do you know, as a consequence of working on this, the backstory in many soap operas? Like, for example, I'm not a soap opera aficionado, but I was friends, I am very, very close friends with someone who was very, very briefly the head writer of Days of Our Lives. And he was there when Deidre Hall, the much beloved Deidre Hall, came back to the series, and she had been killed, and her love, Roman, had left the show and been replaced by a professional baseball player who looked nothing like him. But he came in and he said, he told people he had plastic surgery and he was accepted as the new Roman. But then Deidre Hall wanted to come back to the show, and she said, well, I want my Roman back. And they said, well, wait a minute, we have this guy who's Roman. And she said, I don't care how you do it, make it work. So they had to go into some fucking retreat and do peyote or something. I don't know what they had to do to come up with like a 6-month storyline that would account for the fact that the real Roman disappeared and this baseball player came back and said he was Roman. But then if Roman lost his memory, the other Roman, then this Roman, well, how come he thinks he's Roman? And it was it's funny, Dark Shadows didn't do enough of that in some ways because they never accounted for the loss of what's his name, Tom and Chris, the twins.
Yeah,
the
Tom Briscoe.
werewolf.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just disappeared one day. They didn't care about it the way the Days of Our Lives people cared about it. How privy are you, Danny, to that sort of crazy stuff in the background?
Well, it's funny. I didn't realize that about Days of Our Lives. They did this exact same thing actually on One Life to Live with Todd Manning. The actor left. They brought somebody in as a recast, and it was difficult, but kind of like it took a long time to grow on everybody, and then people really accepted him as Todd. And then Roger Howarth wanted to come back.
They just did the same thing on General Hospital too a couple of years ago.
Oh, did they really?
Yeah.
Yeah, where it's like
Everywhere.
but they did the same thing of like it was like same father, I think, like Victor Lord is the father. Somebody here probably knows One Life to Live better than me. And that's why genetically, like the DNA worked out that way, because but was like raised in a CIA mental institution, like something.
That was
like
with Roman. That's what happened to Roman.
Yeah, some reason why like he really did think that he was Todd. Like what we saw like was real as far as he was concerned, and now there's two of them.
Right, they wrote them as twins.
Oh, somebody's writing this, yeah.
And and they had an evil mother. She was the one who was behind all that. She put one. They both looked like Roger Howarth at one point because they showed a flashback scene with the two of them in what looked like a dentist's office, but it was really some kind of mind control lab. And they made one guy think he was Roger, think he was Todd, and then the other one was written out. And I think it was about 8 years before Howarth came back. And they renamed the other guy. They said his name was Victor Lord. Familiar name.
And I love that. That was the One Life to Live time that I love when it really just was like, it was just crazy and they could do that. So one thing actually that I can say about kind of like understanding the behind the scenes story. There was a period in my life, I'm gonna say it was around 2000, where I got obsessed with like, I needed to know every fact about Dark Shadows. And I'm always kind of like a list maker and a collector and stuff, but like there was like a specific period where I remember I got kind of manic about it, where I had all of the concordances and stuff. And then the Dark Shadows Almanac came out, which had like all the trivia and all the actors listed and how many episodes they'd done. And I needed to like take all of those things and figure out exactly who played what in what episode. And that like was super important to me for a while. So, like, and I didn't have anything to do with it, but you know, obviously I've used it now later. But that was also the period when I looked at like, oh, Ron Sproat like keeps writing about women, like locking women up. Like that was when I kind of figured out the whole like, oh, this is when Sam Hall came. This was the Sam Hall, Gordon Russell, and like how they worked and how they had to kick Ron Sproat out to make the show interesting again. Like all of that whole story actually was what I figured out during that kind of like manic period in 2000. Not actually by reading like any behind the scenes stuff, because the people
You're
who
saying
really
deduction.
did interviews, nobody really talked
Wow.
about it. It was deduction.
Even more
Yeah,
impressive.
it was just looking at the evidence of the show. I could piece together kind of who kind of why they made decisions that they made.
So someone wants to know, did your mom really date Don Briscoe?
She did. I just talked to her about it. They did not date. They didn't date. But I saw my mom just last month. And was talking to her about the show and the blog. I'm finishing it up. And we hadn't talked about Don Briscoe for a long time, but she brought it up again. She was like, "Oh no, wasn't Don Briscoe there?" If people see, like, my mom went to Barnard in the 60s, and I was watching Dark Shadows like in the 80s on New Jersey Network, and she walks into the room at one point, and Don Briscoe's on the screen. And she says, "Oh, is his name Don?" Yeah. And my mom, like, she doesn't really watch TV, like it wasn't a thing. And she said, "Oh yeah, no, I knew him at Barnard. He asked me out. I decided not to because he wasn't Jewish."
Well, there you go.
Yeah. And
it wasn't because he was doing massive amounts of hallucinogens or anything. He wasn't Jewish.
She said he was very nice. He was an attractive guy. He wasn't Jewish, so they didn't date.
It's funny, Danny. It's funny putting the pieces together. In that Dark Shadows Almanac, there was the only interview with David Hennessy until recently, and he talked about the too handsome, too smart, too high-strung actor who came into the office one day on LSD in the middle of a very bad acid trip, sat down in Dan Curtis's wastebasket and would not move. And they had to cancel the filming for that day. And I believe that was Don Briscoe's last show. And rather than replace Chris Jennings, which was a major thread, especially for Carolyn and other people, they just never mentioned him again.
Yeah.
So sad. It's so sad. He was a handsome guy and he made interesting acting choices, except when he was Tim and he was terrible. But that wasn't his fault. Greg wants to know, it's another poll, guys. Curious how many of the group got interested in the show because they were already soap fans. So if you were already a soap opera fan and that's why you watched Dark Shadows. So we've got Alan, we got a couple people. Or they were horror movie fans. Anybody? Bueller? Gravely, I see you. Or something else. And for me, it was something else. I mean, it was, to be honest, I haven't talked too much, but when I was a young girl and they were showing Dark Shadows locally in Rochester, New York, and it was the 1795 storyline. It was Men in Tight Pants. I'm not gonna lie. And my best girlfriend and I would watch it, and so we would draw like Jeremiah and Barnabas in their tight pants. So that's
Lisa, I don't know you, but I want to go drinking
from
with you.
Rochester, New York. The men in the some men fill out those pants better than others. So I'm not gonna lie. And you're 12, and it's it's also new then. Anybody else got any fun reasons why they started watching Dark Shadows?
Weirdly, I started watching it because I wanted a gothic soap opera after school. So I started from the very beginning and thought, wow, this is really good, this kind of atmospheric gothic thing. And then when Barnabas showed up, I just kind of went, what the hell? But it was engaging, and I was totally hooked when Julia showed up. So, and then I went to college and missed the rest of it. But
I watched from the very beginning. The ABC promos made the show. They were all shot on film. I shared them here once. They were all shot on film of Victoria Winters running from Collinwood, Victoria Winters standing on the cliffs at, they shot it in Newport, but it was Widow's Hill. And I thought, I was a kid, I was 9 years old. So I thought, oh, this is gonna be a scary show every afternoon. And then watching the first episode, when it finally arrived, it started out on film with the train and all that stuff. And then I realized it's a soap opera. I remember saying to my mom, I said, this is like As the World Turns, because they'd gone to video. But I was hooked. I just knew that Vicky was going to get pushed off that cliff by Roger, because they went to the trouble to shoot all that footage. And so, and it never happened. And then Alexandra left, and I never got to see her actually jump off the cliff. So
she jumped off a metaphorical cliff later, I guess, with Klaus von Bülow. Joe Lidster, you've got your hand up, and it's like 3 a.m. there.
I have, and I have no memory why. I can tell you when I first started. So I was in a flat share with Stuart Manning, who did the earlier Dark Shadows audios. And so to be supportive, I listened to the early Dark Shadows audios, and I said, I don't really know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. So I said, I want to watch this TV show. And he showed me the first episode one night, and I just went, in the way that you can recognize that something is brilliant, but also not necessarily find it particularly entertaining. That was it. So I was just kind of like, okay, give it a minute. He brought us some more, and then he brought a couple more, and I just went, Joe, I've actually really enjoyed that last audio. I really want to try this TV series. So I said to him, what's a good episode? And this is always my default episode I suggest to people to start with. And it was the first episode of 1897, because he said, all you need, because I said, I just want something colorful. I want something fun and colorful. He said, all you need to know is a vampire's gone back in time to stop someone becoming a ghost. And I watched that first episode of 1897. Literally, I could not get back from the pub. This is like 10 years ago. So I was in the pub every night because I was young. And it was like, I could not get back from the pub quick enough to go, Can we fit one in? Can we do another episode? Can we do another 2 episodes? Come on, just stay up. Watch one more episode. I will do anything. Just watch one more. Because 1897, I think, is just so genius. And it's like Danny said earlier on, it's the fact it just throws everything at you. And it's another thing. And there's another thing. And then you suddenly like, so the kid is now possessed by an adult pretending to be the kid. But you're just like, this is genius. I can't remember why I put my hand up, but there we go.
That first episode of 1897, like you see Barnabas, and then it's just like a comedy scene between Grayson Hall and Thayer David, and as brown-faced gypsies for like 5 minutes, and now that's your show. Yeah, I totally agree.
I saw Magda before I ever saw Julia. And then I was so addicted. Then I went and watched it all, and
but then you look at that and then you say, that was really, for me, like that was the episode 100% where like where I said like that storyline, but then that episode in particular, I was just like, I will love this show for the rest of my life.
It's definitely best rabbit hole.
Yeah. Oh, and so actually, so somebody mentioned there's something that I figured out today, writing the last episode. I didn't realize this. So if you've read like the 1245 post, I realized like the way that I got into Dark Shadows, I was in 6th grade. It was 1982, so I was like 11 years old. And they tricked me. I didn't realize until I was writing this last post. Because I thought it'd be fun to put in like the ad from the TV guide that I saw in 1982 when it was going to be on WNBC New York. And I looked at that ad and I realized that they told me it was a comedy. They said it would be scary, but they also said it was biting satire. And I loved comedy. I loved The Muppet Show. I was starting to love Monty Python. And I was like, satire is my favorite thing in the world. And that's how they drew me in.
And
I
clearly
don't think
it's
a
not
satire.
satire, right?
I don't think it's a satire.
Well, I
Do you
had
think it's
to.
satire?
No, I just think it's comedy. Like
Comedy, yeah.
Yeah. So that's how they got me in, and I definitely had to wait for a little while. I think I had to wait until Grayson Hall showed up before it actually got like explicitly funny. But that was they tricked me into it.
All right, we've got Serena and then Tom and then Jerry. Serena. You're muted, sweetheart. There you go.
There you go. Alrighty, then sorry. For first time zooming.
I think it's the wine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be the wine.
Alrighty. So I the first time I ever watched anything Dark Shadows related, it was a Johnny Depp movie like that. So that was, I know, a bad place to start. Although to be fair, my mom's best friend at the time, she watched the show as a kid and took us all to the theater to see it, and then bought the first DVD set to watch. And I kind of stopped watching it for years because either just didn't have streaming then or anything, and it kind of scared me too much then. But now but I really love the show. I love the blog and everything. And then I've watched all the movies that have gone along with it, like Hodds, Nods, the 1999 at D1. I just really love it and everything, like how it like transcends the generations, as you've written about a little bit, like everyone's experiences of like watching it as a kid or going to the Dark Shadows festivals or watching reruns like that. So it's been kind of neat hearing all that. Like that, and then my grandmother would watch it, and so it's been kind of fun rewatching some of those with her. She's not seen most of it or anything, so it's like she's learning from me.
That's awesome.
In a stead, so it's been kind of fun like that, or like watching, like, say, Curse of the Black Widow now, or the Kolchak movies, and my mom saying, "Oh yeah, I watched those as a kid growing up," like that, So it's very neat to be a part of and everything. And I just love it so much.
Thanks for sharing that. Tom, you've got your hand up.
Can I just ask Serena, have you seen all of it now?
Mm-hmm. Pretty much,
That's amazing. Yeah. From the Johnny Depp film, you've seen all of it.
Yeah, since 2012, I would say, like that. And then watched like from episode 1 to 1225 of the original in less than a year. Mainly lockdown, boredom and everything, but yeah.
Lockdown's been good for some of us.
And then having a glass of red wine with it, because why not? It's only appropriate.
I've already had mine. I'll tell you, I've already had mine. I first started watching it in '67. I was 13 years old. During the 1795 block, friend of mine, my best friend, told me about it. I said, "What? What is that?" So I watched a few episodes. I said, "That's interesting," that kind of thing. Then other things got in the way, and I watched it. I watched it a month or so or something, and then stopped it. Then one day I was at another friend's house, and that was about the time Angelique came on as a vampire, and I was 13, 14 or something like that, and I was a teenager just starting to look at girls, and there's Lara Parker biting Barnabas, and I'm like, oh my God.
It's just great.
And that was it for me.
I can definitely see how that specifically would be pivotal. Yeah,
absolutely.
She's still beautiful too.
You can bite my neck any day of the week. Hell with them. Hell with him. But I got to say that my favorite actor from the show, and Jonathan is great, and they all had something, with the exception of Craig Slocum as Harry Johnson. With apologies to any Craig Slocum fans out there, but Thayer David, Thayer David was the best character actor, or one of the best character actors, I should say, that show had to offer, with his I still do Mr. Barnabas.
whenever something strikes me in the mood, Mr. Barnabas, where are you now? I do that in the podcast, actually. I do the sweepers for opening and closing, and you'll hear, welcome to Collinwood and all the strange goings on. Well, Eddie, that's my tribute to Thayer David. He, a little bit of Walter Brennan in him, I'm afraid, but he was able, he had such marvelous range between Ben and then Professor Stokes, and then hello, my boy, Count Bataffi, and oh my God, and then of course Timothy Stokes in Parallel Time. I mean, he was capable of doing everything. May he rest in peace. And I think that there should be more said about him.
The weird thing about him, right? Have you read about him? He was Harvard 48 or 49. He was with John Simon, the critic, the late critic, who said that he was the handsomest man at Harvard. He was an amazing actor in Harvard theater, and then obesity and drug addiction, and but he always carried that sort of tragic aura of someone who maybe wasn't born that way, but who evolved that way. And apparently, was a guy who had 2 breakfasts every day and is famous for his legendary spreads. Many people thought he was gay. He wasn't gay.
He wasn't, not at all. And
he wasn't gay, but he was like a former heartthrob. He was like an Ivy League genius heartthrob who decayed or some. I don't know how to describe it. Maybe he found his true self. I don't know, as a hedonist.
Well, his daily diet on Dark Shadows, and Roger Davis told me, was Diet Cokes and candy bars. Or make it Coca-Colas and candy bars. I mean, the man would just come to work with boxes of candy bars in his, and that's what he lived on. So it's unfortunate, but yeah, he was going to marry his sweetheart or something like that when he passed away. It's kind of a shame that he had been with her for a long time, but that's something. And of course, and he was starting to come into his own in the 70s with Rocky, with his role in Rocky, and he did a Nero Wolfe pilot, and he was.
It was a go, wasn't it? The Nero Wolfe was a go.
I believe so. When he died, that's correct. So there's a lot to be said. There's a lot to be said about that guy. I'm going to shut my mouth now because everybody is.
Pamela with her hand up.
Go ahead,
Pamela,
Lisa.
I think you're a first Zoomer too, so you'll have to unmute. There you go.
Watching it. I watched it a while. I came home from the hospital. My father said, "You're not watching that." So I had nightmares. And then I was married, and my husband met my best friend, and they had Dark Shadows first. I watched them. They were, and then one night in like 97, the half after the fans were acting like Mean Girl, and I was just missing my quantity chat so much. So I called up my best friend, had a chat, and she, making all sorts of noises, ding, ding, Dark Shadows music and everything. And I was like, "Oh, that sounds interesting." And she goes, "Oh, come in and join us." So I did, and it was big on. They were like, they were acting out. And then some of the actors, some of them were just making snide remarks off to the side. And there was this guy, Graham, who was really funny, string satire on it. After he talked off to the side, dusting, and things like this. And that was really funny. So I watched that. I mean, there was no way to watch Shadows that it wasn't on TV. It wasn't on TV. Sci-fi, which wasn't showing it at the time. So I read the Judy Phillips thing on the internet, and people were capitalizing, and and just then Sci-Fi started to show it again, and then I started watching. It was like 98, 99, and then ended up videotaping it for me and sending it to Florida, actually, in the end. And I got through around 2 months. And then somewhere along the way, I started watching it on streaming and reading Danny somehow. I don't know how that happened, but I came across it once. Like, oh, this is great. Now I have to call up Kay and tell her all about this.
Thanks, Pamela.
Yes,
Greg wants to know if there's any other people here from North Jersey, because North Jersey is ground zero for DS fandom in the 1980s. So anybody else? Another quick poll. Anyone else from Jersey? Danny, we know you're from Jersey because I think you wrote about it, right?
Yeah.
Weren't you in
East
line
PA, so a
ticketing?
close neighbor.
Yeah, and I'm from Rochester, which is also mentioned in the blog, so I'm feeling special. Rochester's been mentioned in It's a Wonderful Life and Danny's blog, two classics. Danny, you called two different things the original sin of Dark Shadows. Please discuss.
Saw that question come up in the chat. I don't remember what either of them are. So
one was Barnabas's betrayal of Angelique in 1795, and the other one, excuse me, was the killing of the doctor by Julia and Barnabas.
Dr. Woodard.
Dr.
Yeah.
Woodard.
Dr. Woodard. Dave.
I would have to say, yeah, that Dave Woodard. I meant it when I said Dave Woodard. Just because that was a moment when really the show just it was not the kind of show that it was anymore. That was that's a super pivotal moment.
It was a huge shock. You just weren't expecting that. So that's just the show shifted.
It was like
being about these villains. Like
right.
You were. I remember watching it as even a 14-year-old, and you talk about narrative or televisual literacy, Danny.
Mm-hmm.
So even at 13, I was like, oh, this is gonna end because this is the good guy. He's found out. Yeah. It'll end, and I'll have to watch something else. This is where the show ends because I don't know anything larger. And then it ends. And then after that point, because we'd been built up to like the guy, the normal guy, before normal guys, they killed left and right. Who cared? After that moment. But that was the moment where, yeah, this is a horrible thing. That the bad guys.
Danny, the Sopranos episode College was a similar turning point some decades later when Tony killed a man in cold blood. And we just said, wait a minute, we're looking at a different kind of protagonist now. We crossed into an area that the old time censors in Hollywood would not have let get through without real punishment.
I remember having a major problem with the recast of Dr. Woodard. I know there was a union strike and it was a last minute thing, but still, when I saw those later scenes leading up to his death, him finally meeting Sarah, it really was difficult for me to see it with the recast actor.
Maybe that saved the show.
I genuinely think the recast helped Barnabas become a major character and Julia become a major character.
Yeah.
Because
that actor was weak and
because it's not Dave Woodard.
Right, yeah.
Lovely, brilliant, amazing Dave Woodard isn't killed. We don't see those people kill Dave Woodard. We see them kill a replacement.
That no one likes.
Yeah.
If you plot out certainly when we did Bloodline, which wraps up kind of Julia and Barnabas and Dave Woodard. Dave Woodard to me is the death of Dave Woodard is a huge turning point in the moment of Barnabas and Julia.
Yeah.
And apparently a public service. According to Lidster, is a public service, really.
It's a public service because they replaced the actor.
Yeah.
And I know they had to. I didn't know they had to.
Even Burke and Devlin had been replaced, and he wasn't.
He was terrible.
We have
terrible recast.
Another story.
We have Burke, Devlin, but we have. I genuinely think that Dave Woodard's murder by Barnabas and Julia, it's an absolute turning point because he's an absolute innocent
Yeah.
Nice
And there's
guy.
and
Not
and
only
really
innocent,
like
but a potential hero.
yeah.
Potential hero. He is someone who is literally everybody else who's died up until this point is related to something or done something bad. He's a nice guy and he's a hero. But I think the fact that he is not nice guy, Dave Woodard, and is in fact replaced.
But
by an
wait a minute.
actor.
I just want to say, you say he's like a hero. He was the original conception, if I'm not wrong, is that after 6 or 8 weeks, that was the guy who was going to put a stake in Barnabas. So they made this decision.
He should have
with
done
Dracula versus Van Helsing.
Right.
I mean, Van Helsing is brought on, and Dan Curtis, let's not forget, was a horror buff. This owes, in fact, a lot of Dark Shadows after this point owes a lot more to Hammer horror than to the history of soap operas. And the idea was that the Peter Cushing Van Helsing figure was going to put a stake in Dracula's heart. But it turns out that Jonathan Frid and Peter Cushing, Jonathan Frid bears much more resemblance to Peter Cushing in the sort of gaunt, dark shadows underneath his cheekbones, and had so much more charisma than the Van Helsing character, that they killed the Van Helsing character.
Yeah,
and this is a problem. I think.
All right,
Dan,
guys.
but
I'm gonna jump.
for a
I'm gonna
long
jump
time.
in for a second, and Jerry, poor Jerry's been waiting like forever,
Okay.
and he is
That's
not a
all
Johnny
right.
come lately. Okay, go ahead.
Am I on?
You're on.
You can hear me. Okay. I just wanted to say that I started out when the first time I saw Dark Shadows was when I was about 7 years old. I was in New York, and my grandmother took me to this house where she had a friend living, and they had 3 girls living there that were about my age, and they all loved Dark Shadows, and I knew nothing about this. And so the way I really got into it was later on, because it was off the air. They had all these books, all these Dan or Marilyn Ross novels, and I started reading them. And then I realized, because the series came back on in the 80s, I think it was, on one of the independents, and I realized, oh, this is way better than those books. And so I started watching the series, and then all of a sudden it was gone. And it was like, well, what happens? I mean, there's got to be more than this to it. And then it didn't come back again until the late 90s, when it got onto the Sci-Fi Channel, and I could see it again and finally find out all of the things that I'd missed, which was, again, way better than those books were. I was really, really happy about that. And as a result, it sort of pushed all of those out of my memory. And I'm actually glad that you did review some of them, Danny, because I didn't realize just how bad they were, because I was just not that discerning, about my reading back then. And I was devouring these novels and not realizing at all the huge flaws that they had in that this really wasn't what the series had been like. Yeah. I mean, it was slightly, where they would have things that didn't follow through from, the previous one, or suddenly you were in parallel time and everything was different, and it was the same people, but they had different names and things like that, or the past. But this just, I mean, it didn't follow through, and you're going, well, wait, wasn't 3 novels ago, wasn't that 1815 as well? And there's a totally different group of people living here. How did that happen?
But if they started you reading, is it a bad thing if they started you reading?
Oh no, I didn't start.
I devoured all the
That
Marilyn Ross too, but I had never read. It was because of Dark Shadows that I started reading them, and I devoured them. Devour is a great word. And even after Dark Shadows ended, I would, this TV tie-in thing. I remember ordering Partridge Family books. And then in 6th grade, my teacher, Miss Van Dyke, picked up one and brought it, said, "What are you reading?" I'm reading this book. And she read out loud, my 6th grade teacher, and she said, "This is really bad writing." And my 6th grade teacher, ladies and gentlemen. And it was a very pivotal moment in my life. I realized, wait a minute, this stuff I've been devouring, maybe it ain't so good. But you know what? It was very important. was very important.
Oh, it was at the time. Yeah. It was, I was reading everything at that point, and I got after that into the John Carter books from Edgar Rice Burroughs. That was through high school, and oh, what a nerd. Oh, people just thought I was crazy carrying these ancient, 1915, 1917 books around with me. But they had all of the vocabulary words that my English teacher was giving us every week too. So I was getting all the extra credit points in class because I had all of these words that I was reading in my books. So other people were asking me for the books now, what books I was reading so that they could get the extra credit points too. But it was a lot of fun. I was like I said, I was reading everything at that point. And that was what got me back into Dark Shadows, actually, was reading the novels. And then of course the series came back on in reruns, and I was able to see what that had been all about, what I had missed as a kid, which was nice.
That's awesome, Jerry.
I was kind of surprised. I mean, the novels are terrible, kind of. But one thing that was just really kind of delightful for me in the last months of the blog, because I wanted to touch all of the tie-ins and spin-offs and get as much as I could and kind of figure it out. And it was ultimately surprising to me that I had to stop doing the Lara Parker books because Salem Branch just broke me as a human being. And then I tried to read Wolf Moon Rising, and I was like, oh my God, it's just more of this. And I have a copy of Heiress of Collinwood, of her fourth book, and just have not cracked it. But I love Barnabas Quentin and the Scorpio Curse. I love the Body Snatchers and the Gold Key comics. I thought I was gonna do all the innovation comics, and I did the first 4, and I got sick of it and couldn't do anymore. And kind of realized that I love of the outside material, I love Bloodline, Bloodlust, Panic, and kind of the best of the Big Finish stuff. And I love Barnabas Quentin and the Mummy's Curse, and the Body Snatchers, and Diana's Hateful Sister in Scorpio Curse. And I love the weird, just how the weird versions of Gold Key when he's fighting flying monkeys and pirates and stuff like that. So much more than even Return to Collinwood, I thought is good. But it turned out to be kind of the crappier ones that had stuff that kind of actually really touched me and made me want to play with those more.
Can I suggest it, because that's what the TV series does?
Yeah.
The TV series doesn't do, well, let's follow everybody up 50 years later and have a nice sedate storyline where Quentin welcomes Maggie back and there's a seance and blah, blah, blah. The spin-offs do what the TV series do, which just goes, I don't know, fucking hell, parallel universe. That's what I'll do a parallel universe. There we go. Nancy Barrett is alcoholic Carolyn Stoddard in a velvet dress, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
That's what the TV series does, and that's, I think, what the books do. I love the books. I love the Marilyn Ross novels.
Well, again,
they're all over there in that corner. I'm unashamed. I love them. I adore them. I love the fact they're all the same.
Places. They went to other places and did other things, whereas the TV series was sort of shrinking in on itself, and you didn't even go to Collinsport anymore. You didn't even go down to the Blue Whale and listen to the jukebox anymore. Everything was in the drawing room now.
But you didn't go to the dining room. There was no dining room. Nobody ate at that house. There's no food being served ever.
Not after season 2.
Right, exactly, Jerry. Andy has hit his hand up for a bit.
Yeah. Well, Jerry, you mentioned the Marilyn Ross novels, and somebody in the comments the last month or so several times recommended The Curse of Collinwood and made it sound so good that I actually bought it and have been reading it. Was that you?
not me.
Oh,
Not
okay.
responsible.
Yeah, well, it's actually not bad. I mean, it's not horrible, is what I'm saying. I mean, it's not good, but it's not horrible. But anyway, everybody was saying that Serena was a unicorn for watching the Johnny Depp movie and then watching the show. Did anybody else watch Strange Paradise before they watched Dark Shadows?
No, I had never heard of it till the blog.
I did, because I thought that I had seen.
No, I watched it afterwards.
I thought I had seen Dark Shadows in the 70s on, Channel 44 in Chicago. But it turns out, when I then saw it in the 90s on the Sci-Fi Channel, this is totally different from what I saw. What is this? And I couldn't place it until on Danny's blog, I saw the name Raxel. Yep, that's what I saw. Because Channel 44 in Chicago had Strange Paradise in prime time for a few months for some reason. I guess they wanted to get rid of all their viewers or something. But I saw that, and then so years later, got to Dark Shadow.
Okay, we have a question from Ubiquitous. They knew the show was ending, but do you know why the voiceover at the end of the final episode seems like it was something that was ad-libbed during the last commercial break? I remember the first time I saw it, it seemed like that's when they discovered that it had ended. So do you know the backstory on that, Dan?
I do. The one thing that I know is that there's a fanzine inside the old house that printed a copy of the 1245 script. So that's the only actual script, the copy of a script that I own. And it is actually pretty different. There's different scenes in it, and it does not have the narration. It just ends with there's a vampire at Collinwood, and then everybody looks shocked, and that's the end.
Okay.
So I don't know anything else about why they added it or when they added it, but it was definitely late in the day.
Yeah, it definitely it felt like that to me too.
Yeah.
Here's another poll for everybody. How many people here have a partner or spouse who just doesn't get the fascination with Dark Shadows? Bueller, anybody?
I've got a family that doesn't.
Yeah, agreed on the family part.
All right, we'll go with family then. Family's good. How many of us then have a partner or spouse? I'll just ask my own question. That's really into Star Trek.
Well, I'm totally into Star Trek myself, so I'll give
Yeah,
that.
Michael, you and my husband can go on the cruise together because he definitely love that. So there's a lot of those overlapping fandoms, I think, which I think Danny kind of touched on in the years of his blog too.
I will say that even though my husband doesn't understand Dark Shadows, he did come to the 50th anniversary fest in Tarrytown and Lyndhurst, and
that's why you married him.
yeah,
Because he's that guy that he'll go.
he's very tolerant. I told him he's out of town, and I told him that this was happening, and I was reading the last post in my office at school today, and at lunch, and getting a little teary, and I texted him. I was like, "What's he gonna say?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I was like, "Yes, that's the appropriate."
That's right.
Crying at the end of a blog for a 50-year-old woman.
That's the only thing to say, Laramie, really, is I'm sorry for your loss. Because I told my husband too that I was breaking up with my best friend Danny over Zoom tonight because we spent the quarantine together. Danny, David wants to know, what do you think of the blooper tapes?
Oh, I love them. Those are great. Yeah. As you know, I have been a very avid and careful blooper watcher.
But separated from the context of the show, do you think that they maybe? Well, I love them.
I think, yeah. No, I think they're made for people who know the show and love the show, and it's just kind of reminding you of the funny things you've seen, and sometimes showing you things that you didn't notice when you were watching.
I just love the boom mic stuff. I don't know if anybody noticed in the invitation that we sent out, but boom mic shadows are required for required viewing. Rob Warner says that he has an adult daughter who is looking to get them into adult DS rehab. And another poll, Robert wants to know if there are any other Outer Limits fans. Anybody else watch Outer Limits?
Yeah, I did.
I did back in the day.
Nothing ever topped the credit sequence, though. As good as they were, it was the credit sequence that lasts in our hearts.
Anything else? Who am I missing? Oh, Litzer's got his hand up again, and he switched from wine to whiskey, I think, is what I'm
Oh my God. All right, Lisa. All right, Lisa McJudgy McGoogle.
You know I'm headed your way, Litzer. When I come back, when they let us come back to Europe, we're gonna hit the bottle hard.
Yes, please do. I want to know, did anybody else not realise the worst character in Dark Shadows was Donna Friedlander until Danny pointed it out?
Yes. I did not
I
realize.
hadn't noticed quite how terrible she was until Danny points it out.
Who was Donna Friedlander again?
Donna
friend
Friedlander
killed.
is Carolyn's southern best friend who gets killed.
Weirdly
and she
clingy,
deserves it.
who forces herself onto Chris.
Gloms onto Chris and
yeah.
The red shirt.
And she's
Okay, thank
literally
you.
in red. She's dressed in red.
The red shirt. Yep.
She's the original red shirt of Dark Shadows, and no one mourned her when she passed.
No one mourned her. I love that.
No one mourned her. Nobody.
Even Big Finish, Dark Shadows, run by me, who literally had Amy singing Ina Klein and Nacht music in Bloodline because I want everything to be referenced. I have never once mentioned Donna Friedlander because she's evil.
That's right.
Can you actually say like are there other references like that you have put in that?
Oh, Bloodline is full of Bloodline is
have
Harry the
noticed?
Taxi. Bloodline, literally anything anybody says in Bloodline is a reference to something. Harry the Taxi, Ina Klein and Nacht music, the tape machines, the tape recordings, and everything.
You have Miss Polish
American.
American.
Can I
Miss Polish American?
in a slightly drunken way, can I just say the one thing I'm proudest of is Quentin talking to his gay son and talking about the grandson's boyfriend as if he's a girlfriend and it doesn't mean anything. And having David Selby say those words, having David Selby say, well, you and Tom seem so happy together. I don't understand why you're not together.
Yeah.
Having David Selby say gay is as normal as straight, I just think it's the most Dark Shadows thing I've ever done. And I'm very proud of it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's Dark
Just the
Shadows
one
for
last
me.
thing on the Donna Freeland. That's
Donna
another one.
Freelander, no.
It's another one of those things where this show is funny, not scary. Like people have like, oh, it's a scary show,
Yes.
but it's like it is structured like in a horror thing that is supposed to be structured as in, oh no, she's going to get killed, and that's the rising tension. But like this is structured as a comedic thing. Like I've got to get rid of this person, and at every moment
She would not go.
Oh, I've got to go. I've got to go to Boston to do. Oh, I need to go to Boston. Like, okay, here's my goddamn keys. It's a comedy scene. Like it is brilliantly structured. As a comedy scene.
Shouldn't we point out that this
He
is
gives her
a-
the keys. He gives her the
Here's
keys.
the keys to the car.
And she shows up. She comes to the house and is like, you know what? Actually, here, I'm gonna give you these keys back. Dude,
It's
you're
kind
a
of
trap.
important.
I chewed off
I
my
think-
own
Yes.
leg.
Yes, not that into you. Chapter 1 is when the guy gives you his
Gives you the
car.
keys. Yeah.
Get that. Just take the car.
The
I
kind
mean,
of
it's
Been there, by the
brilliantly
way.
funny, but also I feel very seen. I feel very. Now here are the cars you can drive. I can't drive.
Oh,
What werewolf man? Take me
I have
with
been
you.
there. Yeah.
before this degenerates too much, I just want to add that don't forget we have Broadway and off-Broadway. Unlike many soap operas in which the people who are on them are just soap opera actors for the moment, we have people coming in from theater schools who are doing musicals and Broadway shows during the day, and they are coming in and they are letting off steam on Dark Shadows. And then you have them egged on by Grayson Hall. And I hate to use this horrible term. Oh, I probably shouldn't, but Grayson Hall was described by somebody as, no, I won't even do it. But the point is, she was hilarious.
dick.
She was gossipy, pushing people in their worst directions, sort of overbearing, preying on people, adding this sort of raucous Auntie Mame element to Dark Shadows, plus Sam Hall, who was sort of a failed Broadway playwright, and a lot of others. Sproat wanted to be a playwright. So you had all these people who, in a sense, thought they were slumming and felt that they, you know, they took it seriously on one hand, but they also were like, let's just go for bloke. Who the fuck cares? Nobody's ever going to see this again. No one's ever going to see this again. Let's have a great, you know, it's like summer stock. Let's have a great time. And that sort of, you know, devil may care stuff, before it spilled over into slovenliness, it was great. When it was a combination of discipline and slovenliness, but then at a certain point, when you lose your writers, when you get down to not just a skeleton crew, but basically a rib, you know, it's then they just let go of it. But really, at its peak, we're looking at off-Broadway, you know, in 1969, Dionysus 69, if you will.
I have to chime in though and say that on The Edge of Night, you had Elaine Stritch.
Okay, all right, you're right.
All the New York soaps.
Ruth Warwick, I Know My Children.
Yes, all the New York soaps had Broadway actors.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it goes back even further, because if you think about the silent movies, that was all of the Broadway crowd that went out west in the off season to make some money. And they
weren't working simultaneously. These guys were going back and forth from the stage. And this was like their downtime, supposedly.
Well, I'm talking about the 1910s here. So
yeah,
they were doing Broadway plays and the soaps at the same time.
Elaine Stritch was doing Company and also doing
Edge of Night.
That's cool.
Yes,
I didn't know that. That's great.
Yes.
Michael E had his hand up a bit ago. Michael, I've been trying to get to you. And then we'll go to Serena and then Andy.
I'm on my way out, sadly. This has been absolutely wonderful. And my congratulations to Danny. I mean, from my heart and everybody's heart. I'm going to be very seen at the end of this statement because you're going to know what a square I am. But we've been talking about different ways that we got into Dark Shadows. And I was a very bookish kid. And I actually got excited because, oh, this is a different way to do Jane Eyre. Or, wow, this is a different way to do Turn of the Screw. And this is a different way to do Owen Wingrave. I was excited because there was a kind of ambition to it. And I think that thinking about these actors as having other careers and other ambitions and, you know, maybe slumming or playing around in the shadows of that here was really a part of it. That there was something more than just spinning out more story in order to sell soap flakes. There was a kind of playful, informed ambition to it. And yeah, very seen, very square. Yeah, I'm a professor, but I love it from that point of view. And I love this blog for maybe some of the same reasons.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael.
That's awesome, Michael. Serena, you're up next.
Alrighty then. So going back to when we were talking about 1970 parallel time earlier in the chat here. So anyone else remember the moment like after Carolyn becomes a widow and then she's like going on all these drunk rants about how she knows the truth of everything, and then she's up in the tower room and then all of a sudden you just see this big old knife up in the air and then blood curdling scream and everything. That was probably one of the craziest moments for me on there. I know like everyone kind of gives 1970 parallel time a hard time saying it's not really that great, but it did have a few good key moments like that. That kind of startled me even a little bit like that, you know, like or parallel time and Anna Jaliek, like with her twin sister Alexis, like then taking her place like that. Like as a twin myself, it kind of freaked me out a little bit because I'm like, that's horrible. Like that, you know.
Well, that scene, I mean the mechanics of that scene were very, very effective. And you know, that was a big jump moment for me too. Was it wow, how are they doing that? And oh my God, she's gonna kill her, isn't she?
Yes.
Also, I have to say, for me, that scene, like Danny said, not much of Dark Shadows scares me. It's too ropey. It's too camp. There's not enough that actually. There's not much that scares me. There's bits that I go, ooh, in a feature film with a lot of money, that scene would have scared me. The one actual storyline I find really creepy is Parallel Time Angelique killing Parallel Time Alexis.
Yeah.
Because they establish Alexis. They go, she's been to Venice. She's had time in Venice.
Yes.
She's had a great time in Venice. She's escaped evil Professor Stokes, parallel Professor Stokes, evil.
Yeah.
She's gone to Venice and she keeps talking about Venice. And she's had a life in Venice. And she's come back because her sister's dead. And then she's like, no, you must all be concerned. All of you must know my sister is, and she's doing all the right things. And then she gets killed. It's the one time I think the show really goes for an absolute.
Everybody started to kind of finally believe her. She was not her sister, and then
perfectly ironic.
No one
perfectly ironic moment.
You know, whenever they got to the end, and Danny's talked about this. Whenever they got to the end of a storyline that was set in parallel time or back in time, they started having bloodbaths and killing off. And so I was actually kind of glad when Carolyn got killed because I was tired of parallel time. So I wanted them to get back to real time. But I was just going to say, yes. And the thing is, don't you know that Louis Edmonds had to have loved that scene where he strangles Elizabeth for all the times at the beginning of the show when she calmed him down and, said the biggest problem I've ever invited is standing before me right now. He finally got to kill her.
I mean, I'm sorry, but Parallel Time Carolyn and Parallel Time Roger are the gay icons our world has ever needed. Parallel Time Carolyn is when she turns up in that velvet dress with that hair, and she's like, "Hiya, I've had a drink," and I'm like, Nancy Barrett.
Yes.
I'm loving Parallel Time you, and then Roger turns up, and you're like, "Oh, Louis Edmonds is playing himself." And it's all. And the worst thing Parallel Time does is when he goes, "No, I was really sexually in love with Angelique," and you're like,
well, that's no, in a very Judy Garland sense that he loved her, but he was he's so catty and wonderful. I mean,
and he just kills everyone. Like, go on, lad.
I mean, I don't understand why the idea of casting Louis Edmonds, who is a wonderful actor, but as this sort of heterosexual pussy hound in the pilot, in the first series, like the one who, the reprobate alcoholic pussy hound seems just really weird to me in retrospect. It's like, what did they cast him because he wasn't really a threat? Because he wasn't really a hunk? I don't know.
I think, but 71 Parallel Time has some of the best acting, I think, in it, and it got really dark. I mean, the scenes with the Hyde version of Christopher Pennock and the woman he picks up as sort of as the mistress almost. I mean, that's fantastic acting, and it's darker than Dark Shadows ever went, as far as like just cruelty of people to people on a sort of a mean streak level.
Yeah.
I introduced Dark Shadows to a friend as in the last 10 years since I got introduced to Dark Shadows. I try to do every year introduce a new person to it because everybody needs to learn. Dark Shadows is the fucking best thing ever. So I've introduced it to a new friend, and we've got out of Parallel Time, actually. We've gone to 1996, 97, whatever it is. He's absolutely flummoxed. He doesn't know what's going on. But what I loved, again, about Parallel Time is it loses all the gothic atmosphere. It loses all the gothic past. It's not about the past. It's that absolute 1970s horror movie of six clever people did a seance and something bad came through. I love Parallel Time.
Count
for that. I
Yorga.
love
It's
that
Count
Parallel
Yorga
Time.
and Dr.
It's
Jekyll and
absolutely a
Hyde.
1970s horror movie.
I love it.
The hat pin.
Andy was up. Andy and Andy's friend there, or Mrs. or some woman that just wandered in.
I'm Brooke Renee. I'm Andy's partner. Oh boy, where do I start? Okay, my favorite part is actually the very beginning, the part that Danny does not talk about. Because I love all of it really, except for like the last few episodes. I really think they blew it. But the very beginning I love because I started watching it when I was no longer allowed to go to live performances, live plays and things. And the very beginning really, it's like a play. I mean, it's wonderful how you can see parts of the set falling down and it's just, and everything is spontaneous, and you can almost tell that they're writing as they're going. And it's brilliant, and they have so much talent. It's just oozing talent. I mean, they have more talent than they can use. And Vicky is wonderful, and David is wonderful, and the developing of their relationship. I mean, that kid, I mean, he had so much experience at the age of 9. Is incredible. I mean, just absolutely wonderful. The worst actor ever, ever is Roger Davis.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrible. But other than that, I mean, just oozing talent. Yeah. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Conan Tobias has a question. Danny, the vampire bite at the end of the series suggests that they were going to stay in the awful 1841 parallel time here. The show continued. Do you know if that was the case?
Oh no, I think that was just a little bit of like, it's the last minute. Let's like kind of let's like do a little reference back to like, go back to the beginning. You know, what everybody knows and loves about this show is a vampire. Let's just in that last second do a little vampire moment.
It felt like a callback to me too. Laramie has a question for Joseph Lidster, and it's not, what are you drinking? So Laramie, hit it.
First of all, I just wanted to say I appreciate what you said about David Selby and the definite queer characters in Bloodline, which just as a little gay kid in Montana growing up and being obsessed with all these 60s TV shows in the late 80s, early 90s, it was really gratifying to have that be an explicitly gay character. And thank you, Danny, for teaching me the term straight-splaining. I saw that in a comment the other day. Like, please don't straight-splain to me. Okay, thanks. How did you guys get Julie Newmar? How did you do that? Tell me how you got.
I feel bad. This feels unrelated to Danny's blog, so I will give you. Nothing to do with us. Jim Pearson, who owns Dark Shadows, effectively. I'd found an actress over here, a non-famous actress. I'm very much more non-famous people, but the actor right. I'm very much what I think the TV series did, which is cast someone who's not right for the part. So we have a character called Tommy, who is basically Scrappy-Doo. He's Scrappy-Doo. He's I'm excited about everything. He is played by the most taciturn person I've ever known in my life. The sexiest, most miserable bastard I've ever known in my life, called Mike. And he plays it so good because it's not right for him. And I think that's what Dark Shadows does brilliantly. Jonathan Frakes is not a sex symbol. Catherine Sanders Collins is a sex symbol, and there's something about that works. So that's it's comfortable with Dark Shadows is the wrong people doing the wrong. I love it, and I'm struggling to remember what your question was. Judy Newmar. Judy Newmar again. So when we realised we wanted to do the Julia thing, and I am very much against recasting. I am absolutely against just getting another actor in, because Julia Hoffman isn't an interesting character. Grayson Hall is an interesting character. Grayson Hall makes Julia Hoffman an interesting character. You get someone to do an impression of Grayson Hall, what's the fucking point? It's not Julia Hoffman. It's not Grayson Hall. You get Judy Newmar to play a transmogrified version of Julia Hoffman. That's interesting. And she's brilliant. And yet, no, it was all down to Jim. Jim so casually as well said it in an email. He just went, well, they could try and get you Judy Newmar. And I'm like, going, I mean, mate, I'm like literally going, I could get that actress who was in one episode of Doctor Who, or you could get Judy Newmar from all of the Judy Newmar films. So, yeah. And if you haven't heard Judy Newmar as Julia Hoffman, it's really good. Try it.
He has enough weirdness that I think she really works, because I was very skeptical about that, Joe, and she's just a little off, and that makes her work as Julia, I think, because she's a little off.
It's so scary, because when it's someone like that, I don't have much say. I don't get to direct.
You're just stuck,
And I'm a little bit Dan Curtis about Dark Shadows. I'm a little bit like, we referenced that. Amy sang Ina Klein act music. We have to teach the actress to sing Ina Klein act music because it's on the tape that I am very nerdy about Dark Shadows.
You're going to remake House of
And
Dark.
the problem is, when it comes to somebody else's directing, Julia Hoffman, played by Julia Newmar, I have no say. And you have to be really careful.
It was clever casting.
It's so scary.
Danny, I have two final questions, and I know they're actually really complicated questions. I hope they're interesting questions. Number one, a decision was made very early on when Barnabas got out of his coffin after 1797, so 180 something years, not to deal with or acknowledge the 20th century, cars, television. This becomes a running joke in the Tim Burton Dark Shadows to its, it goes way too far, but that suggests that Dan Curtis wanted to keep it very insular, not to have anything meta, not to have anything going outside the Gothic genre. My question is for you, Danny, is what do you think the pluses of that were, and what do you think the minuses of that were? And the second question, having to do with your blog, is what does it feel like to, as a writer, be so often having to write around something rather than just about something? And or do you see a distinction? Does about and around blur for you? And is that what turned you on about this to begin with?
Yes, very complicated question. So the first one is like kind of what's pluses and minuses about kind of being insular and not talking about computers and the moon landing. I think that it did make it very special. That it was kind of like there was inside ABC Studio 16, and then there was the rest of the world. And the fact that it was so much like kind of inside that studio at a certain point, I think allowed them to do stuff like 1897, where they could just go and do another world, where they could do like weird dream sequences and visions and not be part of the world. They created kind of like this complete aesthetic that I think ended up giving them more more freedom.
But do you think that stagnated it in a way, because nothing was sort of, Dan Curtis was limited by his Gothic and his horror references, and he never let anything of what was going on in the outside world creep in, and maybe that created a kind of closed ecosystem.
It did definitely yeah, I think, you know, I wrote a little bit about like entropy and no new energy coming into the system, and
Right.
that ultimately brings you like heat death. That definitely 100% happened. I guess like the thing that occurs to me is Dark Shadows burned really, really bright. It's sort of like Icarus with his wings, which I've referenced a few times. Of just like they flew higher and farther than they ever thought they could, and like yes, those wax wings are going to melt. Like yes, eventually you learn about gravity, but it is I wouldn't wish for Dark Shadows to be different, if that makes sense. Like the things that were amazing about it and the things that were flaws, I think are so inextricably connected.
Right.
That I think if you made it like more expansive, if you made it more like a soap, it just would have been less of what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
And the second question about your writing, the blog.
Oh, and so what was it like?
Writing
after
around the show as opposed to writing about the show and what that creates in you as a writer, whether you actually think that's a valid new form for television, for writing about television, about pop.
So I want to tell me some more about kind of what you mean.
Well, I mean, if I'm reviewing a movie, I'm writing about the movie. Mm-hmm. And I'm referencing outside things, and I'm referencing the larger issues it creates. But with Dark Shadows, you don't fully into, you know, and maybe this is the camp thing I was talking about before. There is always a distance between you and the thing you are writing about as this historical artifact made very imperfectly by very imperfect people that you love anyway. But there is a distance between you and the material you're writing about that is hilarious, thrilling. But I wonder if it, I don't know if at any point you were like, oh, I'm tired of writing around it.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting. There's a style that I have that actually I developed. So I did a Muppet fan site. That was my first big internet project, called Tough Pigs. And a lot of the style that I brought to Dark Shadows every day, I developed there. And the thing that I kind of discovered at Tough Pigs was this technique that I think of as like experiential review. Like I hate writing reviews basically. And I'm amazed that you do it.
Not anymore.
Because it's so hard. That what I did, like what I learned on Tough Pigs and what I brought to Dark Shadows was like, I don't want to write about the whole thing, like the whole movie, the whole show. I want to start at the beginning. And so that's what I did. Like when I was writing about TV and about movies was like, started a scene and then it's sort of following my experience of watching the thing.
Right.
And so you discover like whether it was good or bad based on kind of like what's happening during that experience. And so I thought that would be cool. I would do that with Dark Shadows and take that day by day. In a way that is kind of talking around the work, like you're saying, but for me felt just kind of like more authentic and more interesting. I think to have that kind of distance. But then like the other thing was that then like that it was interesting for me that I started like writing my own fiction. Like I was saying before, like there were these moments where like with Carrie Stokes. Just in the last few weeks, who I just decided like, I really like her. I hated all of Kathy Cody characters before, like, but there's something very sweet about her, and they're doing such odd things to her, and so I just wrote a post that was kind of about like my sympathy and empathy for her as this minor character. So I think that yeah, a lot of the stuff that I wrote had that kind of distance, and then it was cool that I found ways to every once in a while just like go in deep on a person who I decided that I love.
Great TV criticism, and I wonder if you know Clive James's TV criticism and how it sort of created a voice for somebody sitting on the sofa who wasn't entering fully into it, who was sort of sitting back and at the same time going back and forth between the person on the sofa eating popcorn or apples and the person on the screen.
Yeah. And there's something like, as somebody who studied post-structuralist literary theory in college, which is the only way to go, that that kind of literary theory is it's about your experience. It's about like kind of what the audience brings to the work rather than the reader intention. So there's also kind of a over intellectual pretentious part of it.
Yeah.
Oh, and MST3K, as Alan.
Yeah.
We've got a few more questions here, Danny, from Timothy Johnson. During the last few episodes, when did the cast get notice that the show was being canceled? Do you know?
I don't know, and that's actually like the two big things that I would love to know most about Dark Shadows production is, number one, when did they know that they were going to make the movie? And how did that actually impact, I am sort of like looking from outside saying like, I think these are decisions that they made because they were so tired and they were doing House of Dark Shadows. So I would love to know that. And I would love to know when people knew. The one piece of information that I do know is that Jim Storm said that he actually did a fitting. He did like a costume fitting. But then like didn't hear and then found out that it was don't worry about it, was canceled. And so maybe Joe actually knows these things. So like I don't know. I would love to know. Yes, tell me things.
I only know one thing, which is so Catherine. I've met Catherine Lee Scott a couple of times, who Danny, you do not give enough praise to.
That is true. Catherine Lee Scott is wonderful.
She's not a kaiju, but she is.
No, she is. She's
I think she is who Victoria Winter should be. She is the heart of Dark Shadows, Catherine Lee Scott. But when she came over and I met her, and I was just like, you meet Maggie Evans, and you're just like, oh my God, it's Maggie Evans. But I did say to her, what was it like being given these new parts, suddenly being your Victoria Gisette? But I specifically talks about 1897. You are awful character Rachel Drummond, and then you're amazing Kitty Hampshire.
Yeah.
What's it? And she said, there was no warning. You were not. Because I said to her, were you called in? Were you told, beforehand? Just so you know, next week you're playing a different character. And according to Catherine, they were never told. It was literally, they would go in, they would get their scripts, and next week I'm playing somebody else.
Yeah.
And that's what it was.
And I've heard Jim Storm say the same thing. It was like, he thought he was coming back, he was getting fitted for something, and then they said, oh yeah, no, the place is closed up. Yeah, we locked the doors.
I just find that fascinating. I find that so fascinating because it's the thing that Dark Shadows doesn't have.
Right.
And I think your blog has gone with
Joseph, can I ask you something?
Something like Doctor Who has everything about Doctor Who is covered. And in Dark Shadows, you sit there and go, did Dewey Edmonds know he'd be playing somebody else next week? And you don't know. We don't know. And I love the fact that
that there's some stuff we don't. Yeah.
Catherine Lee Scott, did Catherine Lee Scott ever sort of talk about when she was originally cast, as the sort of blonde, wisecracking Eve Arden, Joan Blondell waitress in the diner, and Victoria Winters is a beautiful Gothic name. Maggie Evans is kind of intended as a sort of Irish sounding, lower class Maine fishing name, and how she had to make the transition into being the show's real Victoria Winters.
I mean, I'd like not to be that geek. But as that geek, we did explain that in Big Finish. I literally have a character going, oh, you were much less fun when you were blonde for that short period of time. I explain everything, David. I am the worst producer of Dark Shadows ever because I'm like, everything must be explained.
I think you're brilliant.
And we explained it because a man she fancied said to her she preferred blondes. And so she went blonde for a little bit, and then he met her and he went, actually, you were better when you were brunette. And she did it.
Do you really believe that Jonathan Frid refused to play Barnabas at the end of the 1840s storyline, Danny?
I do.
I do too.
I do. It is the only explanation.
Yeah, that he was just done. Michael Gravely would like to know, what is your favorite piece of Dark Shadows memorabilia that you own?
The concordances. Really, it's like the books, the fanzines and the concordances. The stuff that that we made, that the fans made. That's the stuff that can be going. Like when during the many periods of my life when Dark Shadows wasn't on, I lived through those, like those concordances, those huge episode guides, the World of Dark Shadows and Inside the Old House fanzines. We didn't have an intranet then. Basically what we had was each other and the writing that we did and the publishing that we did. Not me. I mean, I wrote a couple letters.
Cool.
But there was, but it was a very kind of like, it was a super kind of like Doctor Who, I think. Like it was a very literate fan base and a very like kind of writing based fan base. And so that's the stuff. Yeah, it's funny. Like I don't have like really, they hardly even made like Dark Shadows toys or anything like that. But I don't really, actually, the one thing I have is a vampire van, which I've been keeping with me like for this last week. It's like Barnabas Collins' little
like a little Hot Wheels.
His little model, like Hot Wheels car. Weird that like I've been keeping that with me. Yeah, no, but really the stuff that I love the most is the stuff that the fans made.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Joey, did you mean to still have your hand up? You're up.
More questions?
Okay, serious question. How important is Dark Shadows to you, your life? I can say that Dark Shadows has contributed, a bit heavy, had a few whiskies. I can say that Dark Shadows has helped save my life. It has. What that show has given me has helped save my life, and I just wondered, how important is it to you?
I mean, it's important enough to do 7 years of. There's actually, like, I would say there are a few things that are important to me on that level, and like there's basically the stuff that I liked when I was 13. Dark Shadows, Doctor Who, The Muppet Show, and P.G. Wodehouse was just the stuff that I loved when I was a kid, when I was an adolescent, and I grew up and I still have the same taste. And so like, that's the stuff that is inside me. And it's kind of hard to like, for me actually to separate those four things from my life. But that's the creative stuff that sustains me and that I'm still into. And like, I did a blog on the Muppets. Like that was all, my previous stuff was all Muppets. I didn't do Doctor Who just because there was so much that had already been written and I couldn't add anything. And so Dark Shadows was the one, like of those very small number of things that I love more than anything. This was the one that I was able to add something to and spend some time with.
Great critics share P.G. Wodehouse.
Yeah.
In common, actually. Do you know Sebastian Faulk's P.G. Wodehouse novel?
I don't.
You know, a lot of really good writers were asked to do kind of imitations, or he was the only one who brought it off. Look into that; it will give you much pleasure. You can go home again.
All right. Anybody else got any other questions for Danny?
What's your favorite blooper or prop fail?
Blooper. It had always living inside me is Charles Tate closing the door and the window falling down.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a good one.
That's epic.
What about when Quentin grabs the sword to threaten Barnabas, and the whole thing comes down and the lamp breaks?
Or when the studio catches on fire. You hear them putting it out
Collins
in the back.
You
They're having this serious conversation.
Collins walking through the credits with his costume wrapped under his arm.
I can see his face. He's like,
How can you not love that show? How can you not think that's the best TV show ever made? And he looks and goes, oh,
and it just goes.
The oh shit face, and he just keeps walking.
Doorbell, the whole bell just falls down to the ground right in front of him.
Yeah.
And he and Jeb are looking at each other, both kind of staring at this bell on the ground, but not saying anything about it.
You can't acknowledge reality happening around you because that happens in our life, right? But you have to pretend that things are perfect, so it winds up doubling down on it.
Yeah.
Forgot about the studio fire.
Yeah, that was
the smoke coming in. They're just like
that is key.
You can hear the fire extinguisher.
Fire extinguisher's going off.
So great.
Theater.
One last question. Did you guys, this book is of the period, I was written just for me, late 70s, early 70s, late 70s, monster obsession. There's a huge section on Dark Shadows that has great pictures of all the models, the comic books, all the tie-ins. And if it's a little bit outside Danny's universe, but Monster Mash, if you were the creepy, kooky monster craze in America, 1957 to 1972. If you want to know what the sort of pop culture was among we monster nerds of the period, this is a wonderful book with a foreword by Zachary, the cool ghoul.
Yeah.
So really,
that actually, yeah, I agree. I got that book and I love it, and I read it too late. That is like one of the, it probably, like, if there's anything that if I could go back and have done something different on the blog, it would have been recognizing that the monster culture, like how much fun it was and how big it was like before Dark Shadows started, and so like how much Dark Shadows actually like fit into that pop culture moment. But by the time I kind of I read that book and I learned that, I was like, oh damn, it's now like 1970, and I can't, like, I couldn't really do it.
We have to remember that there were now vampires, or I think we talked about this in our House of Dark Shadows things, but there were no vampires on network television back then, and movies about vampires didn't star Tom Cruise or major actors. They were the Hammer films with Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee. They were the AIP films, Count Yorga. They were, this history that was long gone because we didn't have videos back then. So the idea, someone like me who didn't watch soap operas came aboard specifically because I saw Jonathan Frid on the cover of Famous Monsters of Filmland. It wasn't coming from any of these other universes that some of you all have come. And I think the reason why it's relevant is because I think Dan Curtis, when he went on from here, he didn't do, except for Winds of War, which was a war epic, it's not like he did more soap operas. He did The Night Stalker, Trilogy of Terror, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Burnt Offerings. I mean, he showed that he was into the bloody kind of S&M world of horror movies of the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, David, but Winds of War and War and Remembrance totally a soap opera.
No, I know, I agree. He was comfortable by then with that form. I agree.
Danny, we have a question. Have you ever met any of the actors from the original show?
I like at performances and conventions, not like, I don't know, for real. I saw Jonathan Frid in the late 80s when he was going around doing his Readers Theater, Jonathan Frid's Fools and Fiends. He's so lovely. Like, I went and I saw that, and there weren't that many people, and I went up and talked to him and just had like a really lovely, very warm experience with him. He's so beautiful and so much fun.
I've heard that about him, that he was just a lovely man and was really a gentle soul. And he left for Mexico, right? And lived there for quite a few years after he was done. Well, I think we're getting to the end. I hate to say it because I don't want this to end, but we've been at it for 3 hours now.
It's a bit, yeah.
This has been just a wonderful experience for me
Yeah.
to kind of meet you all online through Danny, and our time is coming to an end. I can't wait to see what you do next.
Yeah, thank you very much. I am
Thank you.
so excited.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, and just thank you all again for
Can I
thank you
just
so
confirm
much
though,
for
Danny, you are
being
going to
so
do the
special and
first.
cool.
Danny, you are going to do the first 200 episodes of Dark Shadows, aren't you?
Almost got through it without.
I think you've been quite unclear on your blog
Episode
about
one,
whether you're going to do it.
episode one.
So I want to
Just
confirm you are
episode
going to do
one.
it.
Unfortunately, it's as you know, it is literally impossible. I can't.
Oh.
It would endanger the world. It would endanger us all.
Good. Good. Leave them wanting more.
I thought yesterday there would be a random episode recap from the past.
Imagine.
As an April Fool's. You
That was
just did a random Laura the a pin episode very seriously, and we're like, what the hell is this? Like, that's the extent of it.
On Danny's side, I would like to say that it was essentially a different show.
Yes.
At that point, the earlier shows are, if you watch them, they are a different show. They're similar, but it is a noticeably different show than what it became when they opened the box and let out Barnabas.
If Danny doesn't review those early episodes, how can we ever cope to understand them?
Well, there was a kitchen and there were exterior shots involved. There you go.
Oh, the kitchen!
There was the kitchen. They
That's
actually
something
did.
about
They consumed
1897
food.
when you go back
There
and
was
watch it.
eating that occurred.
There's people eating kitchen food.
Oh wow!
There
And the first 5 episodes take place over like 12 hours of time.
Well, yeah. Well, they had interior lives and storylines, and then the other adaptations, like in 1991, it's just like, well, we'll just start. It's like, well, we actually liked those characters before because we'd been spending time with them,
right?
And knew them, and you can't just sort of start your show with like these strangers who kind of, here's your drunk, and here's this, like, why do I care about them?
Really good point.
Which is why 1897 did it much better, where it's just like he's landed around a bunch of assholes and just delightful assholes.
1897 does it better, but the opening episode, when you go back and rewatch it, I have to say, when I go back and rewatch, the opening episode is genius.
1897
And
is brilliant, and
Joe's going to host that watch party.
Absolutely brilliant.
Yes.
Joe, you should host that watch party. I would attend just to laugh at
I
them.
would, but I'd be at a different time zone to everyone else.
That's okay. Well, I'll get up in the middle of the night. There you go.
Too busy on my whiskey. Roger Collins.
That's right.
Parallel time, Roger Collins.
Danny, thank you again for committing to this blog and finishing it. It really was
you.
brilliant. We loved
Yeah.
it.
So much.
So much
Thank you,
fun.
Lisa, for comparing it.
I am thank you guys so much for sustaining me throughout this whole insane experience, and I am really excited to share with you the new stuff that I want to do, and I hope that that you find it as exciting and appealing, and I will see you later this year.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you all so much. This has been fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Love you.
you.
Thank you.
All right, see y'all.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.